Okay, we're multitasking as always. That's right, doing a lot of multitasking and having fun multitasking. And of course, it's hot. I just came back from a lunch meeting and everything, but definitely we are having some hot weather here in the North Carolina. We're going to find out about our guests and how the weather is where they are as well. But there is definitely some news going on. Of course, people are paying attention to the pandemic. People are paying attention to the Senate hearings that are going on. And of course, people are paying attention to what's happening in Ukraine and all along that kind of line. But as I said, one of the things I've been dealing with is this hot weather. So definitely, I don't know how the rest of y'all feel, but I can tell you it is definitely hot in this part of the world. And I'd love to hear how it is in your part of the world as well. But that's some of the things that we are hearing people talking about. And of course, people are talking about their own finances and how they are being impacted by what's going on in their world with those finances and all in that space. So, of course, that is some of the things that are happening. And I know a lot of people are thinking about a number of these things. As a matter of fact, it looks like a lot of companies are making cuts. So the layoffs are definitely coming, and apparently announcements of layoffs, hiring freezes, and rescinded job offers have definitely hit the tech industry and startup community for several months. And I actually have friends that are in that space. Now, companies across multiple sectors are making staff cuts as executives worry about a possible recession and weigh all manners of adverse near-term effects on their businesses. Despite those mounting signs of economic trouble, CNBC notes that overall employer demand for workers remains extremely high and that layoffs are near historical lows. A recent LinkedIn poll revealed that 60% of respondents were either worried or very worried about their careers because of economic uncertainty. So that is one of the things that we're hearing people talk about. And following in the wake of this year's layoffs is a new trend, according to the Wall Street Journal, and they were announcing that as well. So definitely, a lot of people are paying attention to these trends and how they are impacted them, and they're saying that the reason is twofold: to share about the experience and also to network with the recruiters. So part of this new trend that they're talking about that I don't think I made very clear and everything was that folks are announcing their job loss. And I've actually even seen that on their kind of like social media sites and all along those lines. But definitely it does seem like a lot of people are doing that and are trying to show how they can actually get their things done in that sense. So I've even seen that on LinkedIn. I've seen it on Facebook and on a number of other sources where people are announcing how they are being impacted by their job losses and what is going on with those job losses and all in that space. So definitely I've noticed that on LinkedIn and I've noticed it in a couple of other places as well. So that is something that we are seeing more and more people doing and things are going on in that space. As a matter of fact, Azorian, a Nashville-based global tech service company, laid off 750 employees. It cut about 300 workers back in November of 2019, whereas health tech firm Olive joined a growing list of Central Ohio companies making layoffs by cutting 450 jobs. And LinkedIn employees have posted being laid off this week by numerous companies, including online pharmacy Capsule, a New York-based tech unicorn, pediatric platform Portal, San Francisco-based online banker Varo, and Traeger Grills. So it looks like a lot of companies are laying off folks. Even the video platform Vimeo, their CEO, Angel Sudi, announced 6% staff cuts on a LinkedIn post. So like I said, some people are even using social media in order to announce their things that they are going in that space. And speaking of that, I was having a meeting earlier today with one of our founders of the network, and he was telling me that he had heard this thing that I'm going to announce as well, which is that Netflix has lost nearly 1 million subscribers. So that is one of the things that are going on in the world and in that sense. So almost a million subscribers fled Netflix in the second quarter, roughly half the numbers the beleaguered streaming giant had warned investors about, but still the most significant desertion in history. So definitely, I'm sure a lot of people will be paying attention to that as well. So, like I said, there's all of these kind of news coming from the economic standpoint and from the economic world, and I'd love to hear what my guests have to say about some of these things and how they are doing in their own lives. Because I've got an author on with me I think is also a fan, if I did the research right, of blues music. And y'all know I'm a big blues fan and all along those lines. So I'm going to bring him up very shortly and I'm going to bring my other guest as well. By the way, one of the other things that I'm going to get to before I get to that is there's an article that says no more money for Mickey. That's right, trips to places like Disneyland are becoming out of reach for middle class families as inflation pushes some activities over budget. So the Hustle announced three family jaunts for Americans in the 1960s compared to today, and found that the cost of a theme park, a movie, and a baseball game were up to 3 times more expensive, even when adjusted for inflation. Maybe that's the reason I haven't gone to a Durham Bulls game yet this year. And I don't think I went to one last year, but actually those tickets aren't all that bad. I just need to get unlazy and get to one of those Durham Bulls games. So like I said, I'm going to bring up Dan, because I think Dan is a fan of baseball as well. I'm going to have to check and see if he's the same Dan that was involved in the blues space and all along those lines. So definitely glad to see Dan here with me. I've got another guest to be joining us very shortly as well. But Dan, when I was doing some research, I saw a number of things that you were involved in, including the media industry. And I don't know what your thoughts are about how the media industry is doing. But first off, are you the same Dan that did some stuff in the blues field? Because I am a long-time blues DJ, and I did see somebody with a similar name that was in that field as well. And I was going like, I don't know. They have the same name. I wonder if that's the same one. So I'm going to ask you that question first. But my parents started a station when I was a youngster that was very much in the jazz field. They didn't hear enough jazz. They didn't hear enough blues. They didn't hear enough news of the African-American community. And even though neither of them had a radio background, they were like, we're going to do something about this. We're going to start our own. So they started their own. And that's where I first developed a love for blues, but definitely a love for other musics as well. So I definitely want to get to baseball, because I know you're into baseball, but are you into blues? And if so, what kind of blues? Because blues has all styles of music, including that is the Chicago style, the California jump blues, New Orleans Zydeco, and there are a variety of other styles out there as well. So I guess that's my first question for you, Dan. Are you the blues DJ kind of guy? And also, what is your favorite type of blues music?
I know who you're talking about, and that is a very different Dan Romanello than me. So that is not me. I'm a music fan, but you definitely do not want to hear me sing. So that I know who you're talking about. He's a DJ and pretty well known with that same, Dan Romanello, not the most common name in the world, but I know who you're talking about, and that is not me.
Well, like I said, that's why I said I was going to double check and clarify, because I was going there. But I do know that you are very much into the media space, because like I said, I found you through podcast guests, and I do know that you have some thoughts about the state of newspapers. And I actually went to school in journalism, did some school newspaper work way back in the ice ages of the 70s in my school paper, and in the 80s at my college paper. And I've got friends even in our current media landscape. And of course, we do know, and we do a show called Media Monday every Monday here on this network, that a lot of people are paying attention to the media and how the media is impacting them and all along those lines. But there's new social media out there now as well, and some people are going like, maybe that's where I should get my news, even though it might not be as guarded. And because it's not as guarded, you don't always know whether those sources are correct or not, but you also get a variety of opinions in that space also. So what is your thoughts about the state of the media today, this being the 21st century? And of course, I'd love to hear your ideas of the state of the media.
Sure. Let me take your audience back to when I was involved in the newspaper business. I worked in that field in the mid to late 1980s, back in what I consider to be the twilight of the golden era of newspapers. And it's hard to imagine this today, but imagine a world with no internet, no cell phones, no social media. People went to the newspaper to get their news, and they pretty much had the market cornered on advertising. And, same thing. If you wanted to advertise your local business, or you had a car or something you wanted to sell, you went to the newspaper. And I left that industry around that time, went to law school and took my career in a totally different direction. But I have watched the newspaper industry struggle to try and find a way to remain relevant in this electronic world that we're in now. And when you think about it, pretty much every other industry, whether you're talking about law, medicine, business, finance, they've all benefited from the use of technology. But technology has seemed to be a real problem for the newspaper industry, who had seen them going from not quite a monopoly on advertising revenue, but seeing it fragmented across everything from internet news sites to social media. And the other thing is, everybody now is a reporter. Everybody is a video photojournalist, right? You have a phone, you're somewhere, news breaks, you record, you play it. So the papers have really lost a lot of relevance. And again, I really haven't been in that world since back in the golden age, but it's something that clearly they've been one of the few industries that really have not figured out a way to transition into the electronic age.
Why do you think it is that they've had a hard time transitioning? Because I agree with you that they have had a hard time transitioning. I was just wondering why you think they have had this hard time making that transition. And what are your thoughts? You kind of alluded to it when we've got so many people that can do their own media and be their own cameraman or whatever. We saw that with some of the Black Lives Matters
Right,
and some
right.
of the things with the police misuse of power, and not just police misuse, but even misuse in other organizations and other institutions as well. Whereas if you're out and about and you see that happening, you can make a statement about it and make a change by taking your own picture and even your own video camera. And as a friend of mine says, many people have a major power in their hands that can even make them money and everything, because there's definitely a lot of use with that cell phone that you
Right.
can use to make you some revenue, whether you're doing social media or whether you're being an influencer or whatever. But why do you think newspapers have had a hard time making that adjustment? And what is your thoughts about the future of newspapers? Because I've even seen community newspapers get bought out by major chains and have a hard time surviving and even being that community voice.
I've seen the community newspaper actually finding a niche where, I think the big newspapers, which I worked for a very, very large newspaper, they started abandoning local news, high school sports, those types of things early on. And now I'm seeing, I get a paper or two papers thrown in my driveway that are obviously viable. They're surviving on local advertising, and they cover local events, local news, things that are more difficult to get than you used to be able to get back in the day. And so I do see that niche being somewhat successful. I've also seen a transition of some of the smaller daily papers transitioning in that route to more of a local oriented news and getting their national news, their sports, their international news off of the wire services, because they can't compete. They're not, it's not timely, and the overhead is tremendous, and they don't have the revenue to support it. So they're sort of going, I think, in that route. And, the bottom line is there's just too much competition. They went from that almost monopoly setting to just such a fragmentation of everything, social media, online news, and they just haven't figured out how to adapt.
That makes a lot of sense. What would you tell somebody that wanted to go into journalism? What would you tell them that they should be doing? Because we got a number of folks that might even be thinking about going into journalism. I went into it and went to Marquette School in Milwaukee way back in the early 80s. And I'm not even sure that if my nephews told me they wanted to go into this particular field, that I would be exactly encouraging them, because like teachers and like some other fields, it's not exactly a field that you're going to oftentimes make a significant living in. And all along those lines, I'm glad to be part of this podcasting network, which is a whole other avenue that people are going to as well. But what are your thoughts about what you would tell folks if they were saying that they wanted to go into media? And I don't know if you have any family members that are thinking about it.
No, but I will say this. I'm recently an author, and much like authors, I think if you go into journalism, there's going to be a vast majority of people that make a very little amount of money, and there's going to be a few people that make a lot of money. So, it certainly is not the profession that it used to be. And, you also probably have to be somewhat of an entrepreneur, because I think to be successful, you're almost going to have to do your own thing. There are places where you can go, and go to work for somebody and get experience, and that's important. But I just don't think you're going to see some of these old time writers that spent 20 or 30 years at the same newspaper. I mean, those days are gone.
I am your business moderator for this evening.
Yeah, I hear you, and that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I wonder what about that whole notion of going into to the field and all along those lines, because it is a very difficult field and all along those lines. You mentioned the book, and I definitely want to hear more about the book, because when I heard about you on podcast guest, that is one of the things that interested me, because it almost sounded like a from rags to riches kind of story.
Right. So I wrote my first book. It's a work of fiction, and coincidentally, since we're talking about newspapers, the title is Paperboy.
Right.
And it is a contemporary thriller, but it also is it's an inspirational rags to riches story about a kid growing up poor without a father back in the 1990s is when he grew up. And he is befriended by a widow, a reclusive, mysterious widow who literally turns his life around. And as he gets older, he deals with a lot of the issues that you talked about in your opening. And it's first and foremost a work of fiction. It's entertaining. I want people, if they pick up my book and you're a reader, I want you to escape, and I want you to be intrigued by the storyline. But I feel like there's a lot of books out there today that just want to hit people over the head with their political point of view. And my book is not political. It's first and foremost entertainment, but there's messaging in there. The protagonist tries to do the right thing, runs into a lot of nefarious characters, corruption, debauchery, murder, and through his eyes, he just tries to figure out what makes sense, what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, and proceed in that fashion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think a Horatio Alger story is possible these days? Because when I was reading about your novel, that's one of the things I was thinking about. I was like, this almost sounds like a Horatio Alger story. And I was actually having a conversation earlier today as to whether that is truly something that can happen in modern day society. Because I was having a lunch meeting and we were wondering how much of that is truly what happened with Horatio Alger, and how much of that is fiction based on our notion of what happened.
I'm not sure about that. I think books are still one of the places where you can write, and libraries will accept your book. People will buy your book. If you're on social media or you're out there in the public eye, there's a lot of people that will try and find something that you said and find fault with it. There's a lot of victimization and things like that today. But I think books are still one of those things that you can publish and, you can put out there, and, people will read them. And, again, my goal is to entertain. But if you get some message out of my book, that's fine too.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely hear where that would be the case and everything. I definitely want to come back more to this notion of your book and everything. But before we get back to that, am I correct in thinking that you are also a fan of baseball? And if so, how did you think about the current state of baseball as well?
Hey, all right.
Yeah, I am a baseball fan. I think, I'm an older guy. I think their fan base is aging. I think they're looking for ways to remain relevant and to get, younger people out there. I live in the Tampa Bay area, where we have probably the worst, or maybe the second worst attendance in baseball. But we have a hockey team here that sells out. We have a football team here that sells out. So again, there's a lot of things going on with baseball. I mean, the other day I'm watching the game, it goes into extra innings, and all of a sudden there's this mysterious ghost runner on second base. I'd forgotten all about that. That was a pandemic rule, where to speed games along, they would put a runner on second in extra innings. And I had totally forgotten about that. And, there's a balance that they have to strike, because the old time fans like me tend to be more of a purist. And the new fans want fast, quick action. And that's not baseball. Baseball has its moments. I mean, there's nothing like going to a game with your kids or with some friends, and, you're talking in between, and all of a sudden it gets loud and you look down and, there's some action. but it's not like most of the other sports that are popular today. Basketball, football, hockey. It's just not wall-to-wall action, and they're struggling with that.
No, I hear you. And actually, you mentioned Tampa Bay. Like I said, I'm here in Durham, North Carolina, which, of course, we are the Tampa Bay affiliates. And we've actually had a little bit better luck because we've actually won, I think, 3 or 4 recent Governor's Cups and have actually sent some players y'all's way and tried to help y'all get some championships as well. And, of course, a lot of people know the Durham Bulls because of that famous movie, Bull Durham, and all along those lines. But that was at the old stadium, and they've been in this new stadium for many years. But we are a proud affiliate of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays and all along those lines, because I've actually got a friend that comments on the field action, because you have those games and things that take place on the in the field after in between innings and stuff like that. I was actually having a conversation earlier with one of our people associated with the whole network, and they actually don't like some of that sensory explosion that takes place, whether they are feeling that the announcers might be too loud, the ambiance is too loud, and I don't think they were a big fan of those kind of activities. With the Durham Bulls, it's like the running of the bulls, where you're running against our mascot, and I think there's some sumo wrestling, and there are a number of those other kind of contests as well that get the kids and even the adults engaged as well. So as a baseball lover, what is your thoughts about that, and are you a fan of those kind of on the field activities? Like I said, our host of the Gamers Den, Jacoby McDuffie, is the one that does those commentating, as opposed to the commentation that you might get of the pitch by pitch kind of plays and all in that space. But I was wondering your thoughts and whether you're a fan of those kind of activities in a baseball game.
I love minor league baseball. In fact, you mentioned the Durham Bulls. That's our AAA team, and
right.
And pretty much because the Rays do a lot of bringing up players through the minor league system. Lots of those players have come through Durham. I was just up visiting friends in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia, and we decided we wanted to go to a game, and we went to, they have a strange name, but we didn't go to a Phillies game. We went to their AAA team, and I'm drawing a blank on the name. It's got something to do with pork, and everything inside this place is pork, barbecue pork and ham and barbecue bacon, and like you said, all the activities, and it's just fun, clean, wholesome fun. The prices are a lot less, and the players are really, laying it out there because they're trying to get to the majors.
Right.
So I love minor league baseball.
No, I'm a big fan of minor league baseball. I was actually saying earlier today that I have not made it to a game this year, and I think partially due to COVID and partially just being lazy. I didn't make it to one last year either, but I'm definitely planning to make it to one this year. I think last year I might have gone to some of the like festivals that were outside of the ballpark, but I know I definitely did not make it to a game last year, and I think it's probably been about 2 years since I've been to one. So I am definitely due for one, and I'm looking forward to getting one in the very near future and all along those lines. So I'm definitely looking forward to it and get ready to have some excitement with it in that space and all along those lines. So I did notice that part of the book deals with, and your book, Paperboy, deals with corruption, debauchery, deception, and murder. So definitely something that I know a lot of folks would love to have in any book that they read. I know that when I get books, and I am a big fan of mysteries and of even some of the science fiction, that sometimes will feature that as well. So I was just wondering how much of this is stuff that is based on things that you saw from your newspaper days, maybe even your own real life, and some of the things that are based on things that happened in your own space and your own time, or how much of this is strictly Dan's imagination?
Yeah, mostly strictly Dan's imagination. I some of the people that have the book comes out August 1st, so it's not out yet. But some of the people that have previewed it, the question I get all the time: is that you? Are you the protagonist, Dylan? No, no, I am not. We have very little in common, but I did have a paper out when I was a kid, and I did work in the newspaper industry. And in the book, the newspaper industry, their story is kind of woven into the plot. The three main characters are there. I really tried to make them endearing and entertaining, and some people that I wanted readers to really fall in love with them. You've got a protagonist who I tried to really make a man that most men would want to be and most women would want to be with. And then you have this mysteriously reclusive widow that for some reason decides that she wants to take this kid who doesn't have the greatest, start in life and just make a huge difference. And then, of course, going back to the debauchery is the protagonist's best friend is just an incorrigible ladies' man. And of course, that gets him into all kinds of trouble. So again, getting back to what I said earlier, my goal in writing this book is I want to entertain. You mentioned you're a reader. I'm a reader. I read a lot of nonfiction too. But when I read particularly fiction, I want an escape. I want to be entertained. I want to forget about what was going on in the day and just escape into this fantasy.
Right.
You had mentioned Netflix. I know they're not doing too well, but it's kind of like a Netflix series, where you can pick up the book and you can read some. The chapters are short. It's easy to stop. And you can read a lot and binge read, or you can just go a little bit at a time. But that's really what my goal was. We're talking about some more serious stuff here, but at the end of the day, my book, I want it to be fun, and I want to take readers through a range of emotions.
What I mean is, as far as
that makes sense. You definitely want to take them through a range of emotions, and all along those lines, I want to bring Meerkat in a minute and everything, but I also wanted, after talking to you for about 26 minutes, take a brief, and I do mean brief, maybe a minute or two, commercial breaks. I'm going to bring up one about an internet company, since we were talking about these companies that are popping up that are doing media. There's a company called Truso, and this guy is trying to step into the Clubhouse space, but he wants to add both video and audio. So I'm going to bring him up, and maybe one of those companies that also deals in that internet space as well. And then I'm going to come back with further conversation with Dan. I've got all kinds of questions for Dan, including the imposter syndrome. And then I want to bring up Meerkat as well. So if you'll hold on a second, we're going to take a brief commercial break.
I'd like you to imagine with me, if you will, opening an app where you can collaborate with like-minded individuals from around the world, get inspiration and in-app tools to launch and grow your business, as well as share your knowledge and earn compensation, all in one app. Well, the name of that app is Truso, short for Truly Social. Hi, I'm Matthew Newman, the founder and CEO of Truso. A new concept in social media, Truso is designed from the ground up to be a platform that's both social and empowering for all its users. How exactly do we do that? I'm glad you asked. First, Truso brings the world together via video. Psychologists assert that video provides a significantly more effective connection than audio only. When you enter a community on Truso, you're face to face. Second, on Truso, you don't have to have 1 million followers to monetize. Our business model allows all hosts and moderators to monetize, no matter the size of your following, by 1, producing fee-based content, and 2, inviting others to join the platform as subscribers. Even more, Truso has an in-app resource library with over 100 free resources, forms, and documents to help you build your brand and grow your business. Third, Truso is inclusive. The deaf and hard of hearing communities make up 360 million people worldwide. Unlike audio-only apps, Truso embraces this community, providing a networking platform that allows them to participate via video and closed captioning. We even have a deaf and hard of hearing foundation in the works as well. Fourth, Truso is both social and safe. We refer to Truso as a virtual extension of the beauty shop, barbershop, and brainchild of the community. A place where there's laughter, along with wisdom, growth-oriented conversation, and genuine connections in a safe space. Truso even has proprietary security to ensure we maintain a safe environment for everyone. Where are we at now? Truso is live, y'all. We've launched in beta, and we're acquiring users daily. We have an incredible development and marketing team, plus amazing celebrity influencers at the table, helping us spread the word around the globe, beginning within the African diaspora and beyond by creating a safe space for growth, connection, and collaboration. We're truly excited about Truso. We've created something special for which there is a global market. And we invite you to embark on this journey with us as a shareholder. The future for Trousseau is truly bright. Join us and let's go there together.
It's time for you to start bossing in social media. For all your social media needs, you've come to the right place at the right time to get your website designed, landing page, social media platforms, and get the training you need to get in front of the people that's ready to buy your products and services. Let me train you with StreamYard, Zoom, Clubhouse, and much more. And let me help you get your virtual professionals, not assistants, because assistants can only assist you, but the virtual professional can give you that professional flavor that you need to expand your reach and increase your revenue. Jump on in and get in where you fit in and start bossing today.
We're continuing our interview with Dan and everything. And like I said, I'm going to bring in Maricat in a minute and all along those lines. And actually, I just heard from Jason, who's also been sent a link, and hopefully he'll join the dinner party as well in the not too distant future and all along those lines. I've actually got to text him with the information. One of the things that our network founder talks about, Nick Palvedo, is some of the things that are not being taught in our school system. He wishes that there would be more education around financial literacy and around hard skills and things of that nature. And he even talks about like how back in the early days, you might even get some more vocational training that you can use just in your day-to-day life, like learning how to take care of the house, take care of your car, take care of a number of other things in that space. And I was just wondering your thoughts around that and whether you agree with him that that is something that we have gotten away from and that we should be getting more into. Because I know that he oftentimes talks about the fact that many of us don't have a balanced checkbook, and he is actually a pension attorney and things in that space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as to whether you think that this is something that we need more teaching about, because I also don't know that we get enough support of the arts, including English, which is a basis, of course, of journalism and all along those lines. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Mr. Dan.
I agree with that 100%. In fact, going back to my newspaper days, we were a big sponsor of junior achievement. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know if that's still around. Is that, do you know if that's still
around?
I'm
not sure either.
But, you know, back in the day, we worked with high school students and they learned about everything from the starting a business, planning a business, starting it, producing a product or service, and marketing that product or service. And I actually was involved in that. That was one of the, you know, we all did different volunteer things, but I was involved in that because I was a marketing major. That was my undergrad degree, and then I was in marketing and advertising with the paper. And you know, there's so many kids today that don't understand not just basic finances, but the value of money, the concept of spending less than you earn, saving money, putting away money in case of an emergency. And just being financially responsible. And you're right. I don't know that is taught, although my daughter, who recently graduated from college, when she was doing her master's program, she taught, I forget the fancy name for it, but it was basically a life skills course that all freshmen were required to take. And it dealt with a lot of finances. And here in our area, there was, and again, I don't know if this is still around, but there was a thing called Enterprise Village, where all the schools would take kids through that as part of the curriculum, like a protracted field trip kind of thing. But it's such a basic thing to understand, like what you were saying. Even if I don't even know if checkbooks I still write checks. I don't know how many people still do that. But the idea of balancing a bank statement, saving money, in, you know, the basics of investing. If you're a young person and you understand the time value of money and just putting away a little bit of money when you're young, after a little bit at a time, after 30 or 40 years, you're going to have a nice nest egg. people don't, that's just not a priority. And I think, like you said, it's because they're not made aware of those things and they're not taught that in schools.
No, I definitely agree. They're definitely not taught that at all and everything. How do you deal with the imposter syndrome? That's something else that we've talked about on a number of our shows. Those people that feel that they're not doing enough. I'm sure that you even have to deal with that as an author, but I was wondering how you deal with that and your thoughts around that also.
I'm sorry, say that again. I missed that.
I said the imposter syndrome, or this feeling that you are not, that you could do more, that you are actually not as good as you should be, and all of that. Because I know we've talked about that on some of our shows here on this network. So this kind of feeling that you could be doing better. And I know part of the imposter syndrome is where you feel, and I'll just give an example, that you want to go for a job, but you always talk yourself out of it. So therefore you never go for it because you can find reasons that other candidates are better. And that's just part of what I think is the notion of the imposter syndrome.
Now that's kind of a deep, that's a deep question. I think today, I feel sorry for young people. I mean, I think it's a very, very difficult time to grow up. For about 4 years, well, first of all, let me back up. When I was practicing law, I was involved with women's, girls and women's athletics. And then I coached college softball for 4 years until through 2021. So I think what you really have to go back and help young people build self-esteem. And one of the big ways to do that, and I'm a big fan, a big advocate of it, is particularly with women, because I had a daughter that played, and that's sort of where I gravitated to, is I just find things like athletics teach so many good life lessons. It's not just self-esteem, but it's discipline, responsibility, teamwork, accountability. And it's a lot of that. And I think today, and social media, I think is part of the problem. We're just developing a society of histrionics, and it's not healthy. I don't have the answers, but I think I know what some of the problems are.
No, I definitely understand that, not having the answers and all along those lines and everything. What is your thoughts about definitely the whole notion of women's sports? Because I definitely knew that you were involved in that as well and had done some coaching. Of course, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Title IX. I actually watched a couple of days ago the Jamaican track women do that 1, 2, 3 sweep. And that woman that has 5 titles, if she's not the GOAT in track, I don't know who is, because Usain Bolt only had 3 world titles and all of that. But definitely I'm seeing some tremendous athletes. Of course, we all know about the Williams sisters and a number of others. And of course, even those ladies from women's soccer. But I was just wondering your thoughts about the state of women's sports from the high school level on up to the college level. And if you would like to see it doing better, or if you are satisfied with where it is in the 21st century.
Well, first of all, I think Title IX just transformed opportunities for women in sports. And for your audience, if they're not familiar with that, basically what that says is equal opportunities have to be given, among other things, in athletics. So if you're at a university that accepts federal funds, which they all do, you have to provide an equal number of opportunities for women as you do for men. So if you field a football team and a basketball team and a baseball team, you have to have a corresponding number of opportunities available for female athletes and scholarship opportunities as well. This right now is probably one of the most tumultuous periods in amateur and college athletics, because you have name, image, and likeness, which is now not just college, but amateur athletes in the high school able to monetize their name, image, and likeness and maintain their amateur status. So you have that going on, which is creating a whole nother dynamic. You have the transfer portal, which applies again to all sports, but there's now this free flow of players, student athletes moving from school to school. And it's really all in the interest of empowering the student athlete. Right. But I'm not in that anymore. My daughter's through with her career and I'm not coaching, but I see some of these student athletes that are transferring, 2 times, 3 times. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, you left school A, you went to school B, you're going to have an issue with transferring credits. Now you're going to school C, you're going to have another issue with transferring credits. You only get 4 years of eligibility, mostly. Not COVID made an exception to that. But, most of these people are not going to be playing professionally. There's obviously some opportunities in the major sports, but pretty much most female athletes and the vast majority of male athletes are not going to be playing a sport professionally. They need a college degree, and or they need to learn a skill and go into a different field. So it's going to be interesting to see. NIL is a year old. We just had the 1 year anniversary that became effective June 30th, a year ago. And then, the other thing now is the super conferences. I don't know, how much you follow this, but UCLA and USC just left their conference out west, and they joined the Big Ten. And Texas and Oklahoma, another big, powerhouse school. So where is all this going to end? And you have to wonder what's going to happen to all of the non-revenue sports, because the one thing driving all of this, obviously, is money. Television money is driving this.
Oh, can't hear you.
And got the mic off and everything. I said I wanted to bring in Marquette and see how he's doing. I did mention there was hot as all get out here in Durham. I think we've been pushing near 95 or 100. So if you'll tell people again, Dan, exactly where you are and how the weather is in that part of the world, because that is something I know a lot of people have been paying attention to, and all along those lines. And I'd also love to hear, after you say, Dan, Marquette, if you can share a little bit of your backstory as well. And then I've got another guest I'm going to be bringing in as well, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So Dan, where are you at, and how hot is it where you are?
Well, I'm in Florida. It's hot today. It was hot yesterday. It's going to be hot tomorrow, and it's going to be hot until the end of September probably. So, it's about 95 here, like it is most summer days. But from what I understand, it's cooler than a lot of other places in the country right now.
Yeah, I think we might be pushing up around the 95s and 100s and all that. One thing that I used to come down to a festival was actually the American Black Film Festival in South Beach, Miami, and all of that. And I can tell you that I love that area. I loved the club scene when I was younger, because I was there at a younger point in my life, maybe about 10 or 15 years ago and everything. But I did not like y'all's pop-up storms, because y'all will have a pop-up storm in the middle of nowhere. So I remember coming out of a couple of the film houses or a theater that might be showing a film, and I'm going like, where did this rain come from? It was bright and sunny, and how does all get out a minute ago? And now I'm in the middle of a torrential downpour.
That happens all times of the day. And the saying down here is, you don't like the weather, wait a few minutes and it'll change.
Exactly. Marquette, I'd love you to share a little bit of your story and what you've got going on and all in your world. I'm glad you're able to join this dinner party and all, and we might have some other people to be joining as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and things that you've got going on in your space.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Marquette. Share a little bit of your backstory as well.
Oh, my personal backstory or my business backstory?
Your personal backstory.
Oh, my personal backstory. Actually, I grew up in Iowa. Basically migrated out west and ended up in near Seattle, Washington area. And I've been an electrician, a commercial photographer. I live out in the country right now, and I'm basically starting our online business, myarket.com, trying to save people's lives.
Tell us what Marquette.com is all about and how y'all are hoping to save people's lives, because we're actually having this conversation as part of our dinner meeting that we do monthly as part of the network and all. And part of what we were talking about is the cost of healthcare and how that cost has been steady going on and things of that line. So I'd love to hear what you are doing to try to help people in that space.
Well, what MyArket is doing is we live our lives digitally. We have a digital legacy. Everything we have goes up in the clouds or on our computers, or we try to back them up, but they actually get deleted or censored somewhere along the way. So when we live our lives, we're actually going to be losing our lives. We're going to be deleted. So what we're trying to do is we're hooking up with Amazon Web Services, one of the companies we're using, where you actually have a life account, a digital life account, where you can actually take, say, a picture, put it in there with the stories, videos with stories, everything like that. You save your life, and that'll be there for generations, for your kids, your grandkids, your great-great-grandkids. And I basically started this because of I did a video of my father back in '97, and I had this great video of him talking about what it was like back in the 40s and 50s. He was in the military in the Korean War, and how much a gallon of gas was, and a gallon of milk. And all of a sudden, I had this DVD, and about 10 years later, I was looking for the DVD. And I was looking at how am I going to actually pass on these great memories to my kids and to my great-grandkids and things like that. There isn't really a good way to do it, so I actually had to come up with something.
No, that's fascinating and everything. Because one of the things I was going to say is that, unfortunately, and I was actually mentioning this as well, this past weekend, I lost my uncle. He passed away and everything. And he was definitely involved in a lot of various great things. He played Canadian football. Some people would say that he helped teach Michael Jordan and some of the basketball players at UNC how to play golf and be involved in that space, and did a number of other things as well. But, some of those stories that he told us are now gone because he is gone. And I know we had even talked at some point of getting to write a book with him and all of that, of some of the great memories that he had and all of that. And that book never came to fruition, and now he's gone. So it won't come to fruition unless I can get together with Tanya and some of my cousins and we can remember some of the things that he told, but it wouldn't be the same as if he had told them himself. So he told about some of the things that were going on in the civil rights struggle and a number of other things in that space that he was part of, including our historical Black Wall Street here in Durham, North Carolina. But I was just wondering, how often do you feel people do not do a good job of telling their stories and getting their stories told? I know a lot of people were very much involved with Ancestry.com, and that was finding their past ancestors. But I'm personally of the opinion that a lot of us don't do a good job of telling those stories that are part of our own ancestral space.
You kind of have to twist people's arms once in a while to get them to tell stories, especially people in the military. People have gone through some pretty bad times in the military, but we try to do it as it's not a public forum where you put something out there, it's automatically on there. You can make it private or public, but even the public part, you get to choose who gets to see your stuff. And most people just choose family members. It's kind of like having a photo album of memories, and you share it now with another family member. And then when they put stuff into it, you're both sharing stuff back and forth. And sometimes you got to get these things off your chest. Like I go for a walk with my dogs, and I'll just think about, my first car or my first date or my first, date that basically ripped my heart out or something like that. And I'll just tell the story. I put it on my phone. And when I get back home, boom, it goes. I arc it. I put it up into my account.
Wow. Yeah. But I sometimes wonder, Dan, how often have you done that? How often have you told your own stories and got your stories told into that space? Because I do think that sometimes we don't do a good job of telling our stories. You are a former newspaper man, so did you do good enough job of getting those stories told? Because I sometimes think that even, and I'm glad that you said what you said about small papers, but I sometimes think that even some of the truly great stories we as journalists don't cover. Like I think about all the great scientists that are doing amazing work at the Research Triangle Park, which is an area here, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and all of that. But I don't know that the science reporters are actually finding or trying to find those people to get those stories told about whatever new inventions that they are making and things in that space. And I think that there are a lot of untold stories that both our mainstream press and our small press are not doing a good job of covering. I would even argue some of our specialty papers aren't doing a great job of covering, whether that's Indian papers, meaning papers that are geared toward the Indian from India community, or African American papers or Hispanic papers. But I think that even they don't always do a great job of covering some of those untold stories. But I was just wondering your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. I think part of the problem is most of the media today is just driven towards sensationalism and clicks and getting eyeballs, and there's not enough positive stories being told. I think it almost seems like the media is kind of followed along the lines of our politicians and have decided that we're better off being divisive and, creating, this sort of division than we are about telling positive stories. And you would think that's exactly right, Marquette. It's all about, in these days, clicks and eyeballs and views and all of the algorithms of how many people. And so everybody wants to click. What's the latest sensational thing that I can see? And sometimes we need to just slow down and, enjoy life and listen to other people's positive experiences.
No, I agree with you on that. And Maricat, what is your thoughts about that? Because that's actually come up on this show quite a bit, this nature. And sometimes videos can help in that nature, even historical videos. But what is your thoughts about this kind of divisive nature that we as a society have? I mean, even there in the West Coast, we've seen some divisive issues around climate change and even around things dealing with cannabis and other things that are started out or were more approved in the West Coast before they got improved in other parts of the country and all along those lines. But how important have you noticed the divisiveness been, and also how has that played into your website and this notion of trying to get good historical documentation?
Well, the divisiveness, you see a lot of social media like Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. More and more people are starting to move away from those sites, because all it is, it's a big, moan and groan site about, you put one thing out there, it's just like, oh, look at that. You look fat, or you look old, you look ugly, and this is a very personal thing where you take your memories and you put a story to them and then you save them. And, if somebody doesn't like what you put on there, well, tough. You're not going to be censored. A lot of times with social media nowadays, people are waning away from social media and a lot of the networks and stuff like that, because they don't like the intrusion of, it's not a total open platform. You're looking at, am I saying the right thing? Am I being politically correct? And I love watching the old shows like, Archie Bunker or things like that, to where they were totally politically incorrect, but we could care less. We just had fun watching them. I mean, you can't even watch a Mel Brooks movie anymore without possibly having it, censored to the hilt.
Yeah, you got to point that with the Mel Brooks analogy and all of that. So definitely. What does My Art Kit mean? Explain that name. I'm sure a lot of people are looking and going, how did that name come about?
My nickname is Noah. So
Noah and the Ark. That would make sense.
And the Ark, there you go. We're out saving the world.
So how did you come up with the nickname Noah? People thinking that you were going to build this ark, which apparently this kind of digital yearbook is and everything, but how did the name Noah come about?
Oh, Noah's from the Ark.
Gotcha. Fascinating. So this is, and I'm gonna bring up our third guest, and it might be our final guest and everything. I've actually had the pleasure of talking to him before, but for both you, Dan, and for My Art Kit, did you always know that you were going to be in the fields that you are in and all of that? So did you, were you the one that was always scribbling and writing at a young age, Dan? And My Art Kit, were you the one with the camera that was always taking pictures? And like I said, I'm gonna bring in Jason, who is a musician, and I think I asked him this before and everything. Did he always know that he was going to be writing music and doing music? So I'll start with Dan. Did you always know that you were going to be a writer, and were you writing at a young age? I know that I started a newspaper when I was in grade school. It was a mimeograph newspaper, and it was probably just me mimeographing some, I don't even know what the articles were, but it was something that I made up or might have come up with. And I definitely remember doing that. I want to say maybe like around age 10 or something like that. And my parents may, coming back to your point of keeping stuff and keeping records of it, my parents may still have a copy of that.
Well, if you read anybody that reads my book and reads my bio will know, I've been all over the place. I mean, I still say I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So I guess, going from the newspaper world to law school, to the practice of law, to coaching college athletics, I've always been more reading and writing inclined. I'm terrible at math. I can't fix or build anything. I have very limited skill sets, but I've always been a writer and a reader. And tutored English in college. I was a teaching assistant in law school for legal research and writing. So I guess it was always kind of with me. But I wrote my first book in my, well, I guess I started it in the end of my 5th decade, but it took a while to get there.
Understood and everything. You mentioned the law, and I definitely want to get to my argument about his photography and other things that he might have been doing in terms of documenting people as a youngster, and definitely want to get to Jason. But what is your thoughts? We talked about the state of media. Like I said, Nick is an attorney and he's one of the founders of the network. But what is your thoughts about the state of the legal profession? We've heard people definitely wanting to change it, and particularly the Supreme Court, because we've heard people that want to stack the court and or get more members of the Supreme Court. And definitely there has been some controversial definitely rulings like Roe versus Wade and some stuff around voting and a number of other things. So what is your thought about the state of the legal profession in the 21st century?
I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I want these two guys to have a chance to say something.
You don't have enough time.
I think in general, I mean, I feel strongly that the rule of law is the bond that holds a civilized society together. And there has been an erosion of that, I think, in a real sense, but certainly from the perspective of people. And so that's a problem. And, there's a lot going on in the criminal justice system. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the Supreme Court. And given what we were talking about earlier, the divisive nature of our country right now, everybody all just seems to line up on their side. How does my team feel about this? I need to be on this side. And, we have some real problems that we need to solve. And we're not going to do that unless we are able to talk to each other and have robust discussion and work things out and let good ideas and common sense, come to the top.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Jason, what's your thoughts? Because definitely legal things have impacted the musical career. We talked about that the last time I had you on and everything, and we know the importance of lawyers, but we also know that the music industry has changed as well. So I'd love to hear maybe your thoughts about the music industry and maybe how the law and music law has played a role in that. So Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you've got something to say, because based on our last time, I know that you are not afraid to speak your mind.
Okay. Well, like I said, that's an ongoing, changing, dynamics. Also, you're talking about the justice system. I mean, there's so many layers, nuances, dynamics, politics within the county, state, and federal level that, I mean, you couldn't even begin to talk about that. Without, sitting here for hours.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely agree with you on that. I want to come back to my arcade and everything, Noah and all of that. But did you know you were always going to be a photographer? And what are your thoughts maybe around legal aspect as well? Did you know, I shouldn't even say photographer, but definitely be documenting things?
You broke up there a little bit. Can you go to say it again?
I said, did you always know that you would be documenting things? So, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around the legal profession as well. But did you always know that you would be documenting things? So were you the one who was going up to your grandparents and asking them to tell the latest story?
Well, coming from a family, especially like Iowa type thing, where you're stuck indoors for wintertime and things like that. And we were pre-social media type thing and cell phones and stuff. So the big thing we always like to do was you would tell stories. You get together, you have a beer, whatever, you tell a story. And it's just one of those things where you start looking back at, my dad telling a story about something, my grandfather, he was in World War II telling stories type of thing. And all of a sudden we're totally going to be forgetting these stories. And I was going to do this when I grew up. It was just one of those things. I did it out of necessity because I have a lot of stuff from my parents and from from my own life and stuff like that I'd like to pass on. And there's just no way to do it. Well, now there is. And there's other places out there that kind of do things similar.
That makes a lot of sense. Jason, share a little bit more about your story and about your music. Because like I said, at the dinner party, I love having different guests come in and share their stories as well. I was glad to have you on last time, but I'm sure people would love to hear more about what's going on in your musical career and how the musical career is going. So if you'll share a little bit more about what you have going on and how you have that scenic viewpoint, you're almost as bad as my man Dan in Florida, because you're over there coming at us from Hawaii. I'm jealous. I want to be in Hawaii with you.
Yeah. Okay. What context do you mean? I'm sorry.
I just want you to share a little bit about the current music project.
Okay. Yeah. Well, right now I've got a six track EP called Valediction. I've had that out since November 1st, arbitrarily speaking, of 2021. I'm on a small record label called Exchange Currency and Plicense. Currently going through some stuff that I'm not going to really share on air right now with my producer and my record label, but that's really I'm going to keep that in-house. Pretty agitated about it right now, actually, but I've got a six track EP available everywhere except Spotify. So
hey, Dan and Jason and Myerka, this is actually for all of y'all. How easy, because one of the things we're seeing is that a lot of our celebrities are also getting out there and having a lot of their life stories being told in that social media space. And I don't know how much of it they want to, but definitely it is being told. And a lot of them are jumping on Twitch, jumping on Facebook, jumping on that. And I know that, Jason, you've worked with some big names in the hip hop industry. Dan, you've definitely probably dealt with some sports people and things of that nature. So how much of this over publicity of our celebrities are you finding to be new, or is it something that we were always doing? But definitely with that advent of everybody having a cell phone, it seems like we're getting more than enough of our news.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No,
it's something that's always been going on. I mean, we've all, how long has People Magazine been around? Before even the advent of social media. I think it's more in our face now. I think we're, it's more accessible to us, so it's more in our embedded in our conscious. But I don't know how different it's been. That's also benefiting the celebrities because they're always trying to get their name out there anyway. I think how things are being reported are more polarizing than ever before. I mean, if you sit here and watch Vlad TV, watch an interview on Vlad TV. And watch how polarizing that is. It's always something controversial. You mentioned clickbait earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Dan that mentioned clickbait earlier, and how things have changed. That's changed the whole dynamics of the newspaper industry, not just the newspaper industry, but how things are reported in general. Because now we're trying to get something that's really controversial because, like it or not, controversy sells.
No, controversy definitely sells, and all along those lines. Myerka, do you have any thoughts about that and the nature of this celebrity society that we live in? And I agree, it's been out there for a while, even in the old days of media. Some people would say that maybe social media has given us a new day of yellow journalism, as many people remember that day when the Hearst newspapers were out there and a number of other things. But maybe we have a new day of that type of journalism, but it's more citizen-based. But that's just my parallel. Is that an accurate parallel, Dan and Myerka? And what are your thoughts about this new rush for everybody to be a media outlet and not always having the facts to go with their opinions?
I guess I'll go with that. Yeah,
I
like the way you did that. I have a thought to go along with their opinion. That's one of the major things right there. Anybody can have a phone. It's really kind of a shame anymore to where something might be happening and the first thing that you want to do is pick up your phone and record it. And there's people standing around and they should be actually acting to help the person. I mean, it's sad. And we shouldn't live in that kind of society. Back in the old days, somebody is getting attacked or something like that, you would help them. Somebody's robbing a store, something like that, you'd try to stop them. And nowadays, you basically, hey, if I get a good video of this, I might be able to make some money out of it. Wait till they come after you.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up, and I definitely want to hear from that other people's thoughts about that as well. But my dad is actually a fairly well-known regional artist here and everything. Some people might even say to some degree, maybe even national, but I would definitely call him regional and all of that. But he had he's a photographer, but he also has some like installation pieces. And one of his installation pieces is actually similar to what you just said because it's called Thoughts and Prayers, and it uses the pull down that you use for a fire alarm and all of that. And what it is in that he has the note or the saying that says thoughts and prayers because of what you just said. Too often people are wanting to give you their thoughts and prayers and they don't necessarily want to give you their actual help. So I mean, the notion is that we will quickly give a thought and prayer, but we won't say the actual helping the people when they need it. So they might give them a thoughts and prayers when they might actually need the actual money or they might need the actual food. But we just want to say that we're going to give them thoughts and prayers and hope that that's going to answer and solve their problems. So that was kind of what his installation protest piece was about and all along those lines. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts around that. And do you think that we sometimes give too many placades and not enough actual doings in when people need actual help?
Yeah, well, getting back to your original question, I
Yes.
think even before social media, celebrities, which you brought up, always had a team around them to build a brand and to promote them. And social media just became yet, another avenue for that. I'm not a fan of social media, but I recognize the power of branding and marketing. And a little earlier, we were talking about, college athletics and the NIL. All college athletes now have a social media presence, and they're branding and marketing themselves. The problem is that you have a bunch of pseudo celebrities that are nothing but an artificial creation of social media. And so the proliferation of everything that that has taken place on social media, there's a really blurred line between who's a celebrity and who is just a social media icon or a social media figure. So
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think it was P.T. Barnum that said there's no such thing as bad publicity. I don't agree with that. There's a lot of people whose careers are being, completely destroyed by maybe even 1 minute or one thing that's said or done that goes out on, social media. So it's definitely, it's a double-edged sword when you're out there trying to brand yourself and get publicity.
But
Define
isn't
the
part of the
difference
problem?
between a pseudo celebrity and a actual celebrity, Dan.
Excuse me?
What's the difference, in your opinion, between a pseudo celebrity and an actual celebrity?
Well, to me, a celebrity is somebody that does something independent from just being a social media personality. Maybe you're an actor, maybe you're, you're renowned in your field in music or the arts or the theater or athletics, film, whatever it is. And then there's an awful lot of people out there that build a huge following of, really just nothing other than being a social media personality. If you can get up, into the 6 figures or higher in your followers, you're going to become a brand in the sense that, you'll get advertisers and you'll be able to monetize that.
And that is awesome.
You know what they call them in the music industry? They call them bot bitches.
Yeah. Okay. That's a term. Sure.
And one of the things I was going to ask both of y'all, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and we kind of alluded to this earlier, Jason, when I had you on before and everything, isn't part of the problem with the media, and I kind of alluded to you to some degree, Dan, as well, when there are, even though we say we don't want monopolies, there are a lot of monopolies in the music industry and in the newspaper industry. I mentioned Knight Ridder earlier. In the newspaper field, in the concert field, there is Live Nation, and in radio there is Clear Channel, and there are certain other ones that are in music and everything. But a lot of our media is being controlled. I think that Nick, one of our founders, says that in terms of TV, it's basically like maybe 3 or 4 media outlets that control the vast majority of the major media and all of that. So I just wanted your thoughts around that, if they are not being quote unquote fair in their reporting, and don't we have some industries like the media and like music that are driven by a few power players, and there's not enough diversity, even though the pandemic has opened up some diversity, but historically there's not been enough diversity. But I'd love to hear your all three of your thoughts around that.
Well, since day one, I mean, let's get one thing straight. The majors or the 1%ers have always ran this country, and they always will. And then and above that is the U.S. government, which funds a lot of the majors. I mean, you know, if you think you can get on as an indie artist, I mean, it's pretty much, it's almost a joke. I mean, unless you're coming into the game with 6-7 figures, it's not going to happen.
Was also an alum of him.
You say it's not going to happen, but I mean, there have been people that have attempted to make it happen. I know that Bootsy is trying to do some independent things, and he comes out of the funk music category. I know that Prince, when he was living, was trying to do some things. Some people would argue that Michael was trying to do some things. Definitely, I think there are some people like the members of the Beatles that have been trying to be independent after they got a certain amount of power.
but they already came across as a major. Like if you're talking like somebody like the Beatles stature, that's a whole different universe.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything. What is your thoughts about this, and how is it impacting your industry, my Arcade? Because like I said, I mentioned one, that you are going up to some degree against Ancestry.com, and you're going up against some other kind of platforms that are out there that are similar. And I remember talking to another person that was in a similar space of, I think it might have been the app space, but he was going up against some things that were already there. So it's not like there aren't other, for lack of a better term, digital yearbooks and things of that the nature that are out there. So what is making yours different? And are you worried about some of this competition that might be out there also?
Oh, the competition, I love competition. You got to love competition, because competition just makes you do better. And there's some great sites out there like legacy.com that basically does with just memorial with your obituaries.
Right.
Ancestry.com basically does with all your past.
Right.
And so we deal with everyday life, to where if something happens that's fun, exciting, even sad, it's time to record it, put a story to it, and put it away, and not let it get away. It's time to get a hold of your parents and stuff like that. Sit them down with their phone and ask them, a little 2 or 3 minute question about their life, and then do another question. And the media nowadays, it's almost you have to kind of choose your media, and then sometimes step outside the box and see if they're doing a good job or not. Sometimes you have to definitely go to more than one media. You have online stuff, you might have TV stuff, but everything is money driven, like you said, like Dan said. But you gotta pick and choose and be intelligent with what you're looking at.
Yeah, that makes sense. What advice would you give for folks that want to sit down and have an interview with their people that are in their life that are older? Like I said, I just hit the big 6-0 in July. I know that I tell some of my stories right here on this network, and I've definitely, if my nephews ask, I will tell them. And of course, you might even try to embellish some of the stories, because we do know that folks like you embellish as well. So
we do that.
One is, it's a really what advice would you give people to get them to talk to their older relatives or even their younger relatives? So what is the best approach to approaching people about recording them and getting them to tell their stories? Because and how do you advise them to do that? And how do you recognize when people are embellishing? And do you have any kind of ways to warn people against that? Because I know you want them to tell their stories, but you might want to embellish it. Like if you were at the the war at Iwo Jima or whatever, you might want to say that you were the first person there, and you might have been all the way in the back of the line and got there right at the end of everything. But I'm just using that as an example. Or if you were at Pearl Harbor, you might want to say that you were right there when the bombs were dropping and you saw all of that taking place and all of that, and you might have been like 5 states away and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, how do you deal with that when people are asking you for that advice?
are always watching.
Oh, that's just human nature. It's like talking to a girl at a bar or something like that. You might embellish your story a little bit. It's their site. It's their life, though. It's their site. They can put whatever they want to on it. And if they want to kind of fluff it up a little bit, that's totally up to them. But it's better if you're truthful, honest, because your kids and your grandkids and stuff are going to see this, and they're going to. It's like, hey, Grandma, was Grandpa really like that? And she's going to go, well, I don't know, but you gotta. And the way you approach people to do it is you just talk to them. Like I said, you take a phone out and just take a little video of them for a couple of minutes or something like that. And it's kind of like getting a hobby. It's going to take some time to get all those little memories, all those little things going. And some of them might get a little bit, more than they're supposed to be. But what the heck?
Yeah, that's true. What the heck attitude and everything. I'd actually asked this earlier of Dan, but I'm actually asking it to everybody because it actually came up, like I said earlier, in that luncheon conversation that we were having earlier today and everything. But, we're all sold that Horatio Alger story, or that we're all going to go and win the lottery and all of that. And I was wondering, how realistic is that, and how much should we try to discourage people from going after that vision when we know that the odds are probably like 1 in a million and all along those lines? And even that coming up from dirt story isn't always totally dirt. Sometimes you might have some leg up within that story, or maybe some of your ancestors gave you a advantage that others may not have had. So it's not always as easy as the tale is told in the fairy tale version and all of that. So I was just wondering, how much of that should we discourage, and how much of that do you think is realistic in the 21st century? How often do you really hear Horatio Alger type stories?
So let us showcase your
For
knowledge.
anybody.
I think you see it and hear it. I mean, in tech, certainly you hear those stories, and I think you have to continue to inspire people to become successful. And so in my writing, my book, other than entertaining, I really want people to become inspired, and I think that's important. I don't think we can give up hope, and right now there are unfortunately a lot of people that suffer from hopelessness.
Right.
And so, we have to remain optimistic, even though I don't think right now we're at this particular time, we're not necessarily in a very optimistic moment, but we have to remain positive.
No,
this is still the best country on earth, and there's still plenty of opportunity here.
Gotcha. Jason, what's your thoughts? You're working in that independent field. You've been all over places. I think you've been in California, if I remember correctly. I know you've definitely been now in Hawaii, and you've lived in other cities as well. So you've run into all kinds of people. And of course, you work with a lot of other independent musicians as well. So how difficult do you feel it is to make it in the music industry at this particular time?
I guess it depends on what your definition of making it is. Do you want to be a songwriter and try to get placements with majors? Do you want to be an independent artist, have a regional following? Which pretty much the same rules apply if you're going to get a major. Well, there's a lot of different ways to get a major record deal, but you're going to have to knock out your region and do the groundwork if you're not Rick James' son or something like that. There's so many different tiers and layers, within that as well. Just like I said, in the court system, it's the same thing, in the music industry. I mean, it depends on what you want, what your definition of success is. I don't have any delusions of grandeur. I'm not going to win a Grammy. I don't care.
So you don't care. So you're just trying to make it. And I've heard that from other songwriters as well, where people are more interested in getting the message out and things along that line. So it sounds like that's what you're saying as well.
I want to do my small records and write songs for established artists. That's it.
Gotcha. And what would your idea be? Well, what established artists have you worked with so far, those that you can reveal and talk about? And what would be your ultimate established artist that you would like to do a song for if you had your wish?
I have under my BMI catalog, I have ASAP Rocky, Kesha, ASAP Ferg. Kesha's probably my biggest artist.
And what would be
Because
your dream artist?
I did two different versions of it. I did an alternative version of my own, and then there's another one that wasn't released called "Shots on the Hood of My Car."
It's called Shots on the what?
Hood of my car.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What was that all about? Tell us how that title even came about. That sounds like a very unique title.
It's about basically drinking and you know waiting for the world to end and partying like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, hey, that sounds like a good idea. It almost sounds like 1999, and all along
kind of similar. It's conceptually similar to Prince's 1999. Yeah,
that's
I think
what
he did that in
like.
1984, 85.
Hey, that's fascinating. If you could live in any century and any decade, I just thought of this question, and this would be a new question that I might have to add to my repertoire of questions. But if you could live in any century that we have gone into the past, which century would you live in and why? Like, I know some people might want to go back to the Western days. Some people might want to go back. I'm back to a big fan of the Harlem Renaissance. So going back to that kind of Cotton Club Harlem Renaissance era might be fun for me and everything. But to all three of you, and there might be some ones that are definitely sports oriented, like the old baseball heyday. So I guess I'll toss that to you, Dan. If you could live in any century, which century would you live in, and why would you live in, or decade, and why would you live in that decade?
I'm good. I've lived through a lot of decades. I mean, I was born in the early 60s. I grew up in the 70s. I worked my way through the 80s. I went to law school at the end of that. I like we talked about earlier, I've lived in times when there was no cell phones, no internet, no social media, and those days were great. Growing up, in a very simple way. Was one experience, and living in the world we live now is another. I'm good. I'm happy with just the way things are, and I'm glad where I'm at. And towards the end of my law career, I regularly told people, I'm glad I'm glad I'm 55 and not 25. I'm glad those years are behind me, and I look forward to going forward.
That makes a lot of sense. My Arquette, what about you? If you could live in any decade, what would it be, and why? Are you satisfied with where you are? I mean, just like if you could have a fictional time to go back in time.
You know what? I'm gonna pretty much co-sign on what Dan said. I'd probably turn back the clock for me about 20 years, 30 years, and live in the era that Dan lived in. Like the era I lived in is so complex. The era I'm currently living in is so complex. It's so there's so many different, like I said, and I know I keep sounding redundant like a broken record, but there's so many different layers, nuances. We're so divided. We're so divided as a country, and there's no unity. Everybody looks at each other, and they look to attack. They don't look to unify. I would have much rather grown up probably in the 70s and probably came of age in the 80s than what hell of a world that I have had to grow up in. Currently, I feel like I'm still growing up.
Yeah. Jason, what about you? Is there a period that you would like to live in?
What's that?
No, I was asking Jason if there was a period that he would like to.
I thought you were asking me because I didn't know.
Okay. I didn't see my Arquette had bounced and everything. Part of my problem and everything. Hey, one question I was curious about, I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about this, is this notion. A lot of people are getting very excited. We talk about some of the things about social media, but there is also the blockchain and this whole notion of the metaverse and the things in that space. So I was wondering, are y'all excited about this new technology, or are you frustrated with it, or do you think that it doesn't have the hope that people are giving it? Because I've heard some people that have definitely given it a lot of hope, and they think that it is the new era. I think, as I mentioned to Jason, I've even heard some people when they talk about NFTs saying that it is the way to eliminate the middleman being like managers and agents and things of that nature. But I have heard a lot of people excited about it. But then I've also heard that some of the crypto has been tanking in terms of finances and in terms of stock. But I guess I'll toss that to you, Dan, because you study the media and everything. But what are your thoughts around this new economy? And are you excited about it, or are you worried about it?
I'm going to take a pass on that because I sat down one day. I'm an investor. I invest, for myself. That's one of
Right.
the things I do. And I sat down one day and tried to understand blockchain. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm not the dumbest either. I mean, I've done a lot of things. I couldn't. I don't know what they're talking about. And so, I understand the concept of being able to sidestep the banking industry to conduct financial transactions, which right now, that's as I understand it, that's one of the seductive uh, things that draws people to cryptocurrency. But I literally sat down and tried to understand and go through how blockchain works, and I just gave up. And as far as I'm concerned, if I don't understand something, I don't invest in it. And I stayed away from crypto, and I think it got up to what 70 or Bitcoin at least got up to 70, and now it's I don't know. The last time I checked, I don't check it a lot, but I see it go across the ticker 20. That's just not something that I'm interested in.
That makes sense. What are your thoughts around it, Jason? I know that we've had that conversation a little bit the last time, but what is your thoughts around it? And are you thinking that it is going to be the kind of way to get people out of some economic doldrums that some people are thinking it will be, including some in the entertainment field?
I hope I don't sound so cynical. Forgive me for sounding cynical, but it just seems like another convoluted way for the 1% or the extravagantly wealthy to insulate their wealth a little bit further.
No, I can definitely understand that, and I don't know that that's sounding cynical. It sounds like you might have some good points there, and I'm sure that some people that might even definitely agree with you on that level and all along those lines. But definitely, I can see where folks might be wondering about that. One thing that I think I mentioned this to you the last time I had you on, and I was just wondering, how do you deal? And this is for you, Jason, but I'd love to hear Dan's thoughts about it as well with those that are the naysayers. We know that whatever we're going through, whether it's our parents, whether it's our significant others, or whether it's just friends that are supposed to be your allies, we oftentimes will face folks that are supposed to be on our side, but they wind up being naysayers. So I was just wondering how both of you deal with that. And I'll start with you, Jason, and then I'd love to hear Dan's thoughts as well, because I'm sure even when you told folks at this age, because like you said, this is a book that you decided to write late in life, you probably had some folks, maybe even some folks in your family that were going like, Dan, you've lost your mind. Authors don't make any money. They're almost as bad as restaurant owners. And therefore, we don't know why you're even trying to do this. And I'm sure that you probably heard some answers similar to that and all along those lines. But I'll start with Jason, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and whether you dealt with those naysayers and how you fought them off.
You have to do your thing. And I don't really, if I care about what somebody else thinks, I got to remember, well, what have they done? What's so special about their opinion? Why are they the authority? I mean, it sounds kind of oppositionally defiant, but it's true. It's like, okay, well, what gives you, kind of an expert analysis over what I'm going to do with my life?
That makes sense. What is your thoughts about that, Dan? I'm sure that, like I said, you did decide to write this book later in life. So I'm sure, and I've had some other friends that have been late life authors, and I've even contemplated maybe doing some writing of a book at some point or another. So I'm sure that there are folks that have looked at you like, hey, why are you doing this? I'm particularly doing it at this age.
Well, I feel like I faced that my whole life. I mean, I grew up very modestly. I was the first person in my family to ever graduate from college. And, back when I got into the newspaper business, a lot of people said to me, you're set, you're going to be here for the rest of your life. And I found another opportunity and built off of that. And then from there, I went to law school, and people thought I was crazy to stop working in my late 20s, early 30s and go to law school. I did that. I was a trial lawyer for 25 years. I was doing very well. I was very successful. And one day I just decided I'm done with this. I'm walking away. And people told me I was crazy. What are you doing? What are you going to go do? Well, I'm going to go coach college softball. What? Are you out of your mind? But I've always just kind of did what, the next thing was, no particular plan, and never really worried about what other people thought. And
how much gratification did you get from making that decision? You put in 25 years as a trial lawyer, and then then you went and actually, did something that you were passionate about. How much did that make a difference in the satisfaction of your life?
Well, that was just it. The law was something I did to provide for my family, and I was financially driven. It was, that's why I did it. And one day I woke up in a hotel room. It was actually my birthday, which was Father's Day. I didn't see my family. I didn't see my kids. I was traveling all over the state trying cases, and I was like, what am I doing? Enough of this. It's time to take a step back and enjoy, what time I have left. My kids were older. I had some financial independence, and it was just time to do something that was more meaningful than just, chase the almighty dollar.
What made you, and along those same lines, what made you decide that you wanted to get into women's athletics and to being a coach? Because I'm thinking it might have been that you had daughters and they were already in that, and you might have got drawn into it. Because I know to some degree my brother has done some coaching of soccer because I have those two nephews and they were playing soccer, so he did some assistant coaching with them. I don't think he was ever the head coach, and I'm sure that he might have even done some with the. I think they were getting into football and maybe even some other sports. I can't remember whether they did lacrosse or not, but I know they definitely did flag football and soccer and all in that space. But I was just wondering what made you decide that you wanted to coach and particularly do women's coaching.
It's a pretty common path. I had two kids. I was a baseball player growing up, but I didn't want to force my kids to do anything. I did expose them to the bat and ball sports. I have a daughter and a son. And everything else, karate, gymnastics, all kinds of activities. And my daughter gravitated towards softball and showed a real talent for it. She was actually committed to play at a major college when she was in 8th grade. So I grew up working with her and coaching travel teams and helping, other young women get through the process of, trying to, get noticed by colleges and earn a scholarship. So I always had that background. And then when I was getting ready to retire, I actually had because I was a partner in a firm, I had a 2-year exit plan. While I was towards the end of my second year at a local college here, I got a call from a mutual friend that said, "We have a new head coach. She's young. She's looking for somebody with experience to help her out." And so that's how I got into doing that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Jason, did you ever get involved in any ed sports? And if so, what drew you into the sports world? If you did any sports growing up, or was it always music?
I was a sports journalist for 20 years, sports editor at newspapers for 20 years, all the way up to 2021. So yeah, I've been involved with sports probably. I started writing about feature stories on minor league baseball players, and that's really when I was in high school. I was doing that. And I really developed a passion for it. And then I started covering small colleges and high schools, and that's the majority of my career's been that. I've also covered the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, etc. But most of my career's been covering small colleges and high schools.
Dan actually took the question before you got here, and I had forgotten until you just brought that up that you did have that sports reporting background as well. What is your thoughts? And Dan kind of alluded to it, particularly around women's sports, but I'd love to hear from both of you people about the state of the sports industry and the state of sports in the 21st century. I was saying earlier that I did watch the track meet, was impressed with the Jamaican women, and I've heard that the Iron Men did well in the 100, and there have been a couple of other sports in some of these world games. I know the U.S. women just won in soccer over Canada to qualify for the Paris Olympics and all along those lines, or at least I think it was to qualify. But definitely, I'd love to hear your thoughts around just the state of athletics and the state of sports journalism. So I'll start with you, Jason. Dan kind of alluded to his ideas, but maybe he'll have some thoughts.
Kind of a convoluted question, but the state of athletics, as in what way?
In terms of, I'll rephrase it then. Do you think that it is level playing field for the athletes, because I've heard some people that are seeing those big athletes and their wonderful salaries, but then there are other athletes that are not necessarily making that money, and there are some athletes that, particularly our Olympic athletes, that probably would like to get some of the corporate sponsorship that our other folks get.
Well, I mean, obviously, you're always going to have your LeBron James, you know, and then there's not everybody else, but, you know, it's kind of similar. I mean, there's such a tier system there. You know, if you're talking about professional athletics, if you're talking about collegiate athletics, that's a whole different, you know, ball of wax. I mean, there's been, you know, under the table recruiting going on through Friends of the Program since, you know, God knows when. I mean, you know, major universities, you know, have done it. I mean, you know, the bottom line in any, you know, you can get into the rhetoric, you know, once you cut the rhetoric out, I mean, the bottom line, even at, you know, some other smaller levels, even at the AAU level, is winning. Well, it's money, but you know, it's winning.
No, it's definitely about winning and everything. And one thing that I was going to ask, and definitely this is a question I know Dan has been asked before, but I'm going to put it in a different context, because we just actually, well, not we, because I never went to the school. Well, actually, I did go to the school briefly for summer school, but UNC just recently lost a player because he was coming here and then he declassified himself, and now I think he's getting ready to go to South Carolina. So it's one of the recruits that they had, and they were all excited about getting him as part of their already stacked lineup for next year. And then he committed, and then he decommitted. That's the word I was looking for. I said declassified, but I meant he decommitted and all of that. So I wonder, is this going to be something we're going to see more of? We definitely have seen more players that are one and dones and all of that. So those are two challenges that I know exist in college sports, but I was wondering what you feel are the biggest challenges in college sports, and are those tied to the two that I just mentioned? Because like I said, I do know that we had that great athlete that had committed to UNC, and then he decommitted, and now I think he's going to go to the other Carolina, South Carolina. And then, of course, we've seen a whole bunch over the last several years of one and done players. I mean, and they come in for 1 year, they get their experience, and then they go after the Bucks, which I cannot blame them for, because those Bucks are usually pretty good, and they want to not get injured while they're in college. So they want to definitely have as long of a career as they have on the professional level. But Dan, what do you think are the biggest challenges, and are those issues that I brought up tied into what you feel are the biggest challenges?
I think you and I talked about some of this when we were on earlier, but to kind of expound upon that, what you're talking about is part of this whole student athlete empowerment movement. The transfer portal allows literally, it's unfettered free agency, basically. And what Jason was talking about the stuff under the table, that's now above the table. With name, image, and likeness, you now have schools. And just to kind of backtrack for a second, when I've been on a coaching now for a little over a year, but right before the NIL and a lot of this other stuff was coming about, we had to take a pretty strict test. You had to pass it every year. And if there was any questions on there about recruiting and boosters, or the commingling of the two, or gambling and athletics, you knew how to answer those questions. I mean, it was very strict. Now, with name, image, and likeness, under the rules, let's say this recruit you're talking about, wants to go to North Carolina. Before he signs his athletic aid letter, he'll go to talk to other schools and say, they're offering me an NIL deal for this amount of money. What can you do for me? And the coaches now, you cannot say, if you come here, you will get this. But what you can say to a recruit that, let's say he's a quarterback. Well, if you come here, the starting quarterback has this deal for this money. So, it's a matter of semantics. And you're going to continue to see the movement. You're going to continue to see the consolidation of these power conferences chasing the big money, and where that's going to leave the traditional student athlete, the non-revenue sports, and even the smaller schools in total remains to be seen.
How much do you think that shift the dynamics of amateur athletics, true amateur?
Well, it's turned it on its head. I mean, I just saw a report the other day where, and the numbers were crazy. It was because NIL just celebrated its 1 year anniversary. And the true data is hard to find, but one report that I read said that there was $917 million spent on name, image, and likeness. and the median was something like $500. So, what that tells me is there's a lot of people getting a little bit of money. You hear the stories. I think there's some football player that just signed for, 10 or 12 million. And those deals are out there. There's $1 million deals. There's deals. I think BYU has one where everybody is getting, something. It's more of an equitable type thing. But, I'm starting to think, well, is there going to be some buyer's remorse? Because now I think about some of these boosters and some of these schools that got in trouble before, and now these boosters are front and center because they're the ones with the money and the businesses, and in theory, it has to be market rates. In theory, you can't give somebody, $1 million to turn on the automatic sprinklers at your chain of car dealerships.
I've seen that actually done before.
That was actually in a movie
similar to that, and I was kind of
Yeah.
I was sitting there going, "Is this an NCAA violation breaking right in front of me?" It was interesting.
Yeah, well, like I said, just a year or so removed from taking those exams to what the state of college athletics are now, it's just incredible, and it's. I just don't know where it's going to go, but my suspicion is it's like what you were talking about. You're going to end up with 1%ers of college. You're going to end up with 2 super conferences probably that are driven by the revenue sports, primarily football, basketball. And I just don't know what's going to happen to the rest.
I'm guessing that'll be what, the ACC and the SEC and maybe the Big Ten on the outskirts.
Well, the Big Ten has already admitted UCLA and USC. The SEC a few months ago has admitted Oklahoma and Texas. So those are those. And now it's like musical chairs. I'm sure all of the other Pac-12 schools are trying to find out where they're going to be. And UCLA and USC, I think, went from a $35 million deal to a $54 million deal, something like that. So, right away and the other thing that people don't realize is that even with football playing through COVID, colleges took a huge hit. I know the college that I was at derives most of their, obviously it's a nonprofit school, but they devise most of their revenue from room and board, and the school was closed down. So tuition just basically covers overhead. So all these schools are hurting. Football stadiums were empty. Athletic departments, lost money during COVID. And so, they're trying to recoup that, and they're trying to get back financially. And I think a lot of small schools, just in general, are in trouble and may close. So
that's why a lot of like mid majors, go and try to recruit players that are, from international, situations, because that they may find a diamond in the rough or a project because they can't basically afford to get these, 5-star blue chip recruits.
But the other thing that we saw, because I know Marquette, which is my alma mater, did it a little bit. I think that even Central, which is here in Durham, which is an HBCU school, has done it. Is we've seen quite a few people that have gone, and this was before COVID. I guess they're still going in after them. But I'd love to hear both of your thoughts as you're in this space. I do know a lot of folks were going after the JUCO colleges, the junior college players, and all of that. Because I know Marquette had at least a few players that were JUCO, so they'd already gone and spent 2 years in that JUCO system, and then they came in as either juniors or sophomores. I don't think they came in as seniors, but they came in at like that middle level and everything. So is that something that is still very much popular, and is that a trend that you think will continue? I'd love to hear both of your thoughts since you're in that sports space. But I do know that definitely was hearing more people that were going after the JUCOs.
Well, JUCO has always been, if you're a JUCO coach in any sport, you have 2 years of eligibility. It's a 2-year education. Those coaches' jobs are not only to recruit and develop, but to help those players get placed into a 4-year school for the balance of their athletic eligibility and to complete their degree. So that's always been a thing. What Jason was referring to earlier with the mid-majors, what you're seeing now is a lot of these smaller schools are becoming de facto minor leagues for the major colleges. If you go to a mid-major or a small college and you get you do really well, you're going to leave there probably, and you're going to go especially now with the financial incentives. If you have an opportunity to go to a major D1 school and monetize your remaining years of eligibility, that's just what's going on. I don't have access to the transfer portal anymore, but I was just amazed at how many student athletes enter that portal every day. And I don't think every single one of them is finding a new home. So what's happening to them? Are they just not playing sports anymore? Are they finishing their education as just regular students? Are they dropping out of school altogether? I mean, there needs to be some studies done and some of that information needs to get out. So people just don't think the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. And then they're, like we talked about earlier, then they're undermining their ability to get their degree.
No, that's very interesting and everything. And the other thing I know that a lot of people were wondering about is there seems to be sports that were not as popular that seem to be gaining in popularity. I want to say that lacrosse is one of those sports. There might have even been some people that were going after maybe some tennis and golf scholarships. So I was just wondering, do you think that the landscape of college athletics has also widened? Because some of those sports also have their professional outlets as well, because I know that there's definitely professional soccer. I want to say there's a professional lacrosse league. I know that there is definitely professional hockey. And of course, now the track athletes, even though technically they're supposed to be amateur, they are finding ways to get some money if they go into that space, even if they're in the quote unquote amateur space, whether that's sponsorship or whether that's other ways that they find to get around the system. But I was just wondering, are we seeing an increase in opportunities for people that are in the non-traditional sports?
I think so, because ESPN has partnered with the ACC and the SEC. I'm an SEC guy. I went to the University of Florida, so I'm more familiar with that. And so they now have stations dedicated to, full-time college athletics. And so you're seeing all these traditionally non-revenue sports, baseball, softball, track and field, lacrosse, soccer, being televised and gaining a wider spread audience. I mean, back in the day, with some exceptions, it was mostly just the parents and maybe some friends and a few hardcore fans. But they're getting a whole lot more exposure now, and that is good for the student athletes. And again, they're monetizing that through NIL. In fact, one of the biggest deals, one of the first big deals signed, was two twins that were playing basketball, women's basketball at Fresno State, signed a big. It was a cell phone deal. And not surprisingly, they transferred. Guess where they are now? The University of Miami, because of the exposure and, being in Miami is a major market. And, there's just a lot of opportunities there. So, there are a lot more opportunities for the non-traditional, football, basketball student athletes. Non-revenue.
I have to ask you this, Dan, from a coach's perspective, how much is that taken away because the transfer portal, and I think it came out, I want to say, I can't remember, somewhere around 2017 or something like that. Doesn't really matter. How much does that change the dynamics for you as a coach? Because you no longer really, they can just say, well, screw you, I'm going to put my name in the transfer portal. Does that make it harder for you as a coach and as a university to even keep these kids, especially if you're not, from a major conference like an SEC or an ACC or a Big Ten?
Right. When I was involved in coaching, it was at the Division II level. So these were more of your pure student athlete, student first, athlete second. There wasn't a lot of that movement, but there are programs, men's basketball, for example. I think if you follow men's basketball, I think it was St. Peter's made a big run in the NCAAs. I think they might have made it to the Elite Eight. It's a little school out of, I think, New Jersey. As soon as they were done, their entire team was in the transfer portal and their coach had left. So they didn't have a team or a coach. And I've heard and read about a number of stories where there's so many people that leave that it literally is devastating a coach's ability to field a team.
And to coach a team too, because like I said, they can just kind of say goodbye to you, if they didn't agree with what you were saying.
Well, it's
one of the other things that I've been seeing, I love to hear y'all talk about is there's other quote unquote non-traditional sports that were getting a lot of play that aren't even on the college circuit, because I know that there was a lot of people that were really into that whole mixed martial arts and some of that kind of stuff that is, some people even question how much of a sport it is and how much of a spectacle it is, and all along those lines. But I just wondered your thoughts around some of these newer sports, even on the professional level, because I do know that mixed martial arts and some of these other newer sports seem to be getting a lot of popularity.
Yeah, mixed martial arts is huge. I mean, it's very, very popular. And I mean, when was the last time you heard about a boxing match? You know, nobody really talks about boxing anymore. It's mixed martial arts now is what's popular in that, you know, in that type of a sport.
Yeah, it's very popular. Hey, if you thought about getting involved in that, we started a new show, and I know even Lamar Odom, who is a newer show that we have here, they are actually done some boxing and stuff in that space. So I didn't know whether either of y'all had thought about getting involved in that. I know that I need to lose weight, so I'm not trying to do any of that. But maybe one of y'all want to tackle it. I think I'm too old.
I'm too old to get beat up, so no, I'm not doing that.
I've covered a little bit of MMA. I covered a local event here on Kauai, and it was very impressive. You talked about the growth of MMA, and it's very impressive to see just how many people showed up for a local show. I mean, there wasn't major draws there, but you know, we probably had 300 people at the last show that I covered in 2019.
I think it's /C for some reason.
Wow.
/Black.
You said 2019?
Yes, that was pre-pandemic.
Right. And what was your thoughts about the state of sports journalism? Well, I kind of talked about Dan, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, because you were in that space, and we kind of alluded to it the last time I had you on. But are you satisfied with the state of sports journalism? And I do remember the old days of the Howard Cosell and those great sports anchors, but do you feel that sports journalism is where you would like it to be, or is there changes you would like to see done?
Well, I like a lot of things that the Athletics doing. I like the emphasis on more feature writing as opposed to game coverage, because, you know, game coverage is dead. You know, because you can get the scores anywhere, you can get the highlights anywhere, and so, you know, to circumvent that, you have to kind of modify your approach. You know, so, you know, you have to do more features, in-depth features, where you get, you know, profile more players. Maybe they're not even prominent players. Maybe they have a good backstory. You know, it's really changed the way reporting's done. The one thing that I'm concerned about is this blur between, you know, entertainment and reporting is just, I mean, it's evaporated basically. And so, you know, when you're talking about that, it's, you know, Dan, I think, mentioned it earlier about, you know, clickbait and, you know, things like that. But, you know, how polarizing, and I guess it's a reflection on society too, and how polarizing some of the way we report stuff is. It's no longer, people aren't gravitating towards feel-good stories. They're gravitating towards controversy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of upsetting, because it's really kind of changed the dynamic slowly of how people interact with each other on a day-to-day basis. You know, it's seeped that far into society. You know, this I call it the Vlad TV era. I use Vlad TV as an example, because even like Charlemagne the God from the Breakfast Club. You know, I'm not discounting, you know, his style of journalism, but, you know, how much has it changed the dynamics of how we interact with each other? You know, because that stuff seeps all the way down. I'm sure that's probably what they want. You know, it's the old thing, divide and conquer, of course. But I see it in everyday life, how we, you know, kind of mimicked, you know, the way things are reported.
That that makes a lot of sense. I definitely can agree with a lot of what you're saying. Hey, Dan, what's the most unusual sports story that you covered when you were covering things, and the most unusual just news story that you covered in general?
Well, back in my newspaper days.
Back in your newspaper days, yes.
Yeah. Remember, I was more on the marketing, advertising side of the business, so they didn't let me write. So that wasn't something I did. Jason probably would be better to ask that about.
Yeah, Jason, what was the most unusual story that you covered and everything?
One of them was a kid that this was an off the field incident. A kid that shot himself in the eye with a paintball gun. I don't believe he had any permanent damage, but it was still kind of a bizarre story. And a wrestler that cut his fingers off in wood shop with a chainsaw.
Ooh. Yeah, I didn't have any of those. I think the most unusual thing that I remember covering a cancer patient in Florida. Actually, it was where you are, Dan, at Boca Raton, and they were doing like one of those haircut-a-thons. And then I remember that story. I also remember when I knew I was in a different place, because I went and covered a high school there in Boca Raton. And the story that I like to tell is when I pulled in, I saw all these fancy cars, Jaguars, Benzes, and all this other stuff, me and the photographer. And I think I went up to my media contact or my newspaper, the teacher contact. I was like, hey, y'all must be getting paid really well. And she looked at me and she's like, no, that's the student parking lot.
Yeah, that sounds like Boca Raton.
It sounds just like Boca Raton. Exactly. That's where I was at. I was at the Boca Raton News and everything. So it sounds just like what it was and everything. The other thing that surprised me about Boca Raton, but I guess I should not have been surprised, is that there's every town, including the most ritzy towns, have their what do you call them? Their ghettos, for lack of a better term, and everything. And ironically, in Boca Raton, it was near the police station. So, like I said, they had their kind of hood area, and I just remember it being right in central downtown and not that far from the police station. So I was going like, yep, I guess every town has these kind of communities to be ritzy, like Palm Beach and Boca Raton. And the other story that I found unique to cover, and I actually was telling a friend of mine about this, I think a day or two ago, was there was actually a certain animal that was trapped. It was trapped in somebody's, I think it was in their back porch or something like that. But as you know, there are large animals there, dolphins and other things. They actually managed to get a manatee stuck in their house. So I do remember going to cover that. And I want to say that I even saw the manatee. So this is like in the late 80s, early 90s. But the manatee was there and they had to get it out into the inlet that was leading into the ocean.
Was that around Hurricane Andrew?
Come into the residential area because the inlet would go into the ocean and all of that. But I was going like, yeah, that is one big critter and it is stuck in your house. I really hope that they get it away and all of that.
That's an unusual story. You don't hear about manatees getting, out of, their environment, like alligators. I mean, that's all the time. Alligators in the pool, that story's, a regular occurrence. But the manatees, I guess that would probably happen when it starts to get cold because they gravitate towards the warm current. And, I could see maybe, in trying to stay warm, they get out of the water and end up in, because there's so many developments here with the canals and stuff that, they get up over the seawall. I'd be kind of interested.
Yeah, like I said, I was surprised when I covered that story. It was definitely rare. I think I asked Jason this last time that I had him on, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. A lot of times when people think about Florida, they think about, of course, Mr. Santos. They think about some of that division. They definitely think about y'all's tourism places like Disneyland and some of the other ones that exist. I guess that's Disney World. Disneyland is California. But they think about things like that. But what are some of the things that you wish more people knew about Florida? I'm going to ask Dan the same thing about Hawaii, because I know a lot of times we think about the division things that we hear all the time, like what's going on politically, and the fact that y'all are really, in my mind, 3 states in one. But I can't talk because North Carolina's about 3 states in one as well, because we've got the mountains, the coast, and of course the Triangle Park in Charlotte. So we might even be 4 or 5. But usually
Hawaii's almost a separate entity
part
from
of
the
Florida,
United
like where
States.
Jacksonville is and everything. I guess the west part where I think that's Vero and everything, and then of course South Florida, which is a whole other world and everything. So I think y'all got about 4 or 5 separate states within one state and all of that. But like I said, North Carolina can make that same claim as well. But what are some of the stereotypes that you wish people did not have about Florida, and what are some of the beauty points that you wish more people knew about?
Well, on a lighter side, Florida man. Everything is, there's all these sites, only in Dade, and Florida man is always doing stupid things and going viral. My daughter actually went to school. She went to the University of Florida, but then she transferred to San Diego State for her master's degree, and she was told, whatever you do, don't tell anybody you're from Florida. like that's immediately going to cast a negative dispersion on you. And so, we're really, I mean, Florida, we're from everywhere else. I mean, I'm originally from Connecticut, but I've lived here for 40 years. It's a true melting pot. Traditionally it was the Northeast, the Midwest, but now we have an influx of people coming here from California. So, and as far as the politicalization of, we've been talking about that throughout the show. Your mic is off. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, his mic's off, I think.
Yes, I can hear you.
There it goes. We talked about this a little bit, but everything has been politicized, and so was the pandemic. And personally speaking, I'm very grateful for the leadership of our governor because compared to what my daughter was going through in California and compared to what some of my friends were going through in other states, the net effect of how the states came out was negligible. Yet, we had a lot of personal freedoms. And, when individual cities attempted to become more heavy-handed, our governor stepped in and said, no, we're going to do it this way. And I think not just me, but a lot of people are grateful for the way he handled things, the way he rolled out the vaccines. And I just think in the world we live in now, because he is a rising star on one team, he's an easy target for people on the other team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like I said, I've heard some good things about him. I've heard some things not that great and all of that. But I mean, that's any politician. I can probably say the same thing about Biden, definitely the same thing about Trump and a number of other politicians out there as well. One of the things we've talked about, particularly on our news show, but I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about this, because I actually think that we are maybe not as much out of the water as we would like to think we are and everything, but just as people of civilization, how comfortable with you are both of you in us being out of the water with this pandemic? Are you confident that I'm still, even though I've had the vaccine, and even though I know that we've got what is near the herd immunity, we don't have total herd immunity, I am still, hearing about new variants, hearing about new things that are out there, and even everything from monkeypox to some virus that is similar to Ebola that's in Africa. So I am wondering if we might not have rushed out of the pandemic, and if there are not still concerns. Because I mean, I was glad to do. I did. I think I told Jason this the last time I had him on. I did a festival on 4th of July weekend. That is one that I've done for decades and all of that. But I still, even though I did it and enjoyed doing it, I was still a little bit the apprehensive side, because there was tens of thousands of people out there and all along those lines. But what are your thoughts, both of you, as to the nature of the pandemic, and are you feeling comfortable about us being at a point of being nearly out of it?
Well, you're dealing with a virus, and I don't think the virus is going to ever go away. I think we're going to have to learn how to live with it. I think looking back, the idea of a focused program on populations more vulnerable, people with pre-existing conditions, the elderly. I think the focus needs to be there. And I think the rest of us are just going to have to learn. It's not going to get eradicated. I mean, China's tried to do that. You cannot eradicate a virus. And I'm not an expert, but it's a simple scientific fact. It's here. And I guess this latest variant that is some big, long, string of letters and numbers is highly contagious, but less deadly, less severe in terms of symptoms. And so, it's another one of those things where we need to stop being divisive about everything and work towards a common solution to this. But when again, everything to do with the pandemic, if you hear something about a mitigation or something to do with vaccines, everybody is being conditioned to think, okay, what does my team think about that? Right. Because I want to do that, because I want to be a good team player. And we need to get away from that. And we need to depoliticize public health and work towards a reasonable science-based solution without all of the extraneous nonsense.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is your thoughts, Jason? And are you comfortable getting out there as a musician? I know most of you were interested in the songwriting, but you also are a performing musician as well. So are you comfortable with being out there in that space as a musician, or are you still worried, or are you thinking that you're going to be doing more virtual concerts in addition to the regular live concerts?
I I'm gonna pass on that. I'm gonna pass on the whole topic.
Fair enough. Then I can definitely agree with that. And see, and like I said, at a dinner party, we allow people to pass on conversations as well. That's why it's called a dinner party, because I definitely let people bring their thoughts into it, but they're not comfortable bringing it into there. I'm good with that as well. And we're actually going to wind down because it's usually about a 2 to 2.5 hour show, and we're about that. And there are two.
Mhm.
But I know Jason knows that I ask everybody. Dan doesn't know it and everything. But I was curious, and it was one of the questions that was featured in the podcast guest list of things that they gave us and all that I wanted to hear your thoughts about, which is the nature of politics and the judicial branch, because that's something I know that you have some thoughts around. So I'd love to hear how politics has affected the judicial branch of government and what your thoughts are in that space. Because I do know in doing my research, it was something they said you were comfortable talking about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm an attorney, so I spent 25 years in that world. Are you talking now specifically about the recent Supreme Court rulings? Is that
I
what you're
meant it
asking me
in a
about?
generic sense, but I think the Supreme Court ruling can play into it. But yeah, I meant it as they gave it to us on that kind of like things that we could bring up on topics in a generic sense. But definitely the Supreme Court ruling, in my mind, plays a part in it.
Yeah. Well, I think again, if you go back even 10 or 15 years, you had Supreme Court justices that were nominated. They went through the confirmation process. It really wasn't even a newsworthy event. It was pretty much, with rare exceptions, uh, a bipartisan effort. And if there was a problem, then someone didn't get nominated, and or not nominated, but not confirmed. And
Right.
and so now things have become so highly polarizing and politicized that I mean, just think about some of the events that have taken place with the Supreme Court in the last year. The Supreme Court is a very hallowed, sacred institution. There's 9 justices, there's 2 clerks per justice, and there's a small staff.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they don't agree on everything, but they were able to function in a congenial fashion. And now you have a leak of a draft opinion that, to my knowledge, has never happened in the history of the Supreme Court.
Right.
And at its most basic, it's one of the 3 branches of government that is a check and balance on the executive and the legislative branches. And so when you start having politicians threatening Supreme Court justices, you have people doxing Supreme Court justices, you have people protesting, that's a real problem. And people should think, well, if you don't agree with the people that are being protested, flip it. Okay. What if the people whose side you're on were being protested or doxxed? It's not good for what I was talking about earlier. It's not good for the rule of law, which is the bond that holds us together. And when that starts to erode and people start to lose confidence in that, we have a real problem as a society. And so, it's a difficult time right now. And, there's just some things going on with the Supreme Court that are unprecedented. And it's not a good thing, because where we end up from there is, at an extreme, we end up with vigilantism and ultimately anarchy. And we can't have that. So, we have to figure out a way to get together. And if you want to talk about a single issue, obviously the Dobbs case that overruled Roe v. Wade probably gets the most attention. But if you want to have an intellectually honest discussion about that, it's nothing more than the issue of abortion, it's not banning abortion. It's simply returning the issue of legislating abortion back to the states, and that's all it is. So every state now and the elected officials will be accountable to the electorate for, among other things, how they fashion laws on abortion. Probably the most significant decision that came out of this court was the West Virginia case, where they said now that Congress has to specifically provide enabling legislation to the executive branch's administrative agencies. You can't have, for example, the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission, can't regulate climate change as part of their regulating the market. You can't have, unless Congress, the body that is tasked with enabling and drafting the laws, that's their function. They have to give specific direction to these agencies, and they can't just say, you handle this, and then let a bunch of unelected, bureaucrats, make policy, whether you're talking about the Department of Health, the Department of Education, or any of the other agencies. That's probably the most significant decision that came out of this session, and you're not really hearing a lot of people talking about that. But that's going to change the way that we are governed by these various administrative agencies that are part of the executive branch.
Yeah, and then people are talking about it from a different standpoint of even trying to change the court, as we talked about earlier as well. Like I said, getting to wind down things very shortly. But I did want to come back to the book just one more time. You said the book will come out on August 1st. Where can people find the book, and what was your inspiration for writing the book? I think you kind of alluded to it, but I'd like to hear a more direct answer as to what inspired you to particularly write the book and where people can find it when it comes out. Because August 1st isn't that far away. It's about 2 weeks away.
No, we got into some serious conversations, but again, I wrote the book to entertain, and it is a work of fiction, and it's not as serious as some of the things we've been talking about here today. It's fun. I want it to be fun, and it's available pretty much at any any retailer, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can learn more about the book and about me on my website, which is authordanromanello.com.
Sounds good, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm going to try to get a copy of that book. It sounds like it's going to be a truly amazing book for people to check out and all of that. So I know folks are definitely looking forward to it, and I just know a lot of people will be trying to get a copy of it. I might have to get both of y'all to get your own shows on this network, because I'm liking both of y'all, and I'm kind of the de facto program director. So both of y'all have great personalities, so I might have to get y'all on the network on a regular basis.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
If y'all are open to that conversation, that possibility, because like I said, we're definitely having all kinds of great guests, and y'all have been some amazing guests and all of that. Who do you think is your target audience?
For me?
Dan, right.
Yeah, I think it's any reader that enjoys entertaining fiction. I think it falls into the category of a contemporary thriller, coming of age. This particular book is really almost a two-part book. It's the coming of age inspirational story of how this kid rises from poverty to become successful. But I plan on it being a series. The second part of the book is about his adventures as an adult. And the second book, which I'm writing now, will just be more of the same. And it'll be a series about his adventures and his the main characters and all of the different things that he runs into. We talked about in this book, the various characters, the corruption, the murder, the debauchery, all that stuff that makes the reading entertaining.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Jason, if you had to answer that question, who would you say is your target audience with your music?
My target audience is pretty much the region of Hawaii. I made the this record was a regional record. It wasn't a national record. It's basically made for the islands. You know, Big Island, Oahu, Kauai.
I'm doing great. I'm literally happy to be alive. I'm so blessed.
Definitely, that's a great target audience, and I definitely think that's an amazing target audience. And I don't know if you answered the question last time, but if there was a dream person that you would love to have sing one of your songs, as you are also a songwriter, who would that person be? Is there somebody that you would just like make you head over heels if they decide to do your music? Like if I was a songwriter and I'm not a songwriter, I would love to have Stevie Wonder do something of my
that would
music.
that would be beyond beyond comprehensible for me if I collaborated in any way, shape, or form with somebody of Stevie Wonder stature. But you know, that would be one. I'd take that.
Definitely, and all along those lines. Hey Dan, is there any because there's the writer that is in that detective space that's out of Florida, Carl Hyson, I believe is his name, and everything. I was trying to remember it, and of course, definitely Walter Mosley is somebody that I've admired, and there's some other authors as well, including some of the science fiction ones, and definitely Sue Grafton, who did the whole letter campaign, is one that I've got several of her books. Don't know if I got all of the ones that she made it to, and she never quite made it to Z and all of that. And I think the family they agreed that they were not going to have her get it to Z. But are there any authors that have inspired you that you use as kind of like your guidepost as you are doing this first book, and maybe you've got other books planned as well?
That's a good question, because I am a big fan of Florida fiction, and this book, at least the second part, is set in Florida, and the future books will be. So you mentioned Hoke Mosley. I think Charles Willeford wrote the Hoke Mosley series. John McDonald, even Lawrence Sanders had, he wrote a lot of books, but he had a series about this kind of an eccentric detective out of West Palm Beach. So all of those people were inspirational for me. There's another writer by the name of Tim Dorsey, who was a former newspaper guy, who writes a Florida series. Carl Hassan, you mentioned, he's probably the most famous, the most commercial. But yeah, a lot of those guys, I read most of those books. I'm a fan, and I sort of, went in that route. But out of all those guys, most of their books are purely entertaining. Like I said earlier, I like to try to put a little bit of messaging into my book. Some people may not even, pick up on it. But I was inspired by Tim Dorsey, who writes a lot of deep dive Florida history into his fiction. And so that he was kind of an inspiration in having me have my protagonist kind of look at some of the issues we're all facing through the eyes of a truly innocent, apolitical perspective.
That makes a lot.
One thing that was interesting that you mentioned, Dan, and I did not realize this until so is there like regional versions of like books, like you mentioned the term Florida fiction?
Yeah, when I say Florida fiction, it's just Florida based, books, fiction that's set in Florida. We're such a diverse state, the Keys, Miami, Tampa Bay area, Daytona. So when I say Florida fiction, it's just fiction set in the state of Florida.
Okay, I was just
but even
I didn't know if there was like subgenres or something.
I'm glad you asked
kind of intriguing to me.
Yeah, and I guess even along those lines, because he spent a lot of time in Florida, I guess maybe one of the initial Florida fiction people would have been Ernest Hemingway, because he definitely set a lot of his
there you go. Yeah,
in that area, and it was definitely set in that space. And a lot of times people, and I guess this is kind of what you were alluding to as well, when I think of newspaper, people that use their newspaper background as part of their fiction, and sometimes it's not total fiction. But another author that I'm a friend of, actually I think he was California based, is Hunter S. Thompson, or that kind of like embedded himself in his journalism stories, and he did Fear and Loathing at the Kentucky Derby, Fear and Loathing at Las Vegas, and all along those lines. So I guess he would be kind of a regional person as well, even though I think his was more West Coast based, because I know definitely, well, Kentucky Derby was in Kentucky, so I guess it was all over the nation, but it was definitely newspaper based, as he was a former newspaper man as well. So do you think being a newspaper man helps being a fictional writer? Because like I said, Hunter S. Thompson embedded himself into his stories and everything. It sounds like you have used some of your own experiences as well. So whether you're on the ad side or the print side, do you think it helps being a journalist to improve your writing skills and to get into this field?
That's an interesting question because, when you write a newspaper story, there's a very mechanical formula to follow. And it's the same thing with legal writing. I was a lawyer and I had to go to law school, and you're basically writing exams, and there's a very mechanical formula that you follow. So, I mean, I guess in the sense of vocabulary and, things of that nature, yes, but the writing style is completely different. And when I submitted my manuscript to my editor, let's just say my lack of creative writing in the fiction genre, stuck out, and I needed some help, but I'm learning, and it's all just part of the process.
Are you trying to tell me, Dan, that the big red pen was being used mightily by your editor and by your publisher? Because even as a journalist, I am familiar with the big red pen, and how it can definitely impact what's going on. So did the big red pen impact you?
I'm trying to think, because I'm not a technology guy, but the online editing with there was a lot of red ink on my screen on a regular basis.
Yes, I could definitely believe that. I could definitely hear that red ink and all of that sort. Well, like I said, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I could go on and on, as Jason knows, and talk forever and a day. But I do need to wind down, as we got another show coming up at 7, and the show usually runs about 2 to 2.5 hours. And 3 hours, and all along that space and in that sense. But the question that I ask everybody, and I'm going to ask you as well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is one, if both of you can tell where folks can find you and how they can find you on social media. And then this is a global network. So any message of positivity and hope that you can give our global community, as we've talked about a lot of these hard issues like COVID and like the climate and a number of other things. So people are looking for hope. And that's one of the questions that I ask just about all my guests, is a message of positivity and hope that they would love to share with our global community. So that's my last 2 questions for both of you. If you can tell how they can reach you, and also any message of positivity and hope and all of that. And do know y'all are now part of the family. So I'm definitely going to be reaching out to you, Dan, and Jason has been on more than once. And I'll also be reaching on to Mr. MyArkit that has that lovely program. And folks can go to myarkit.com, if I remember correctly, in order to learn about that digital program that he has. But I would love to have all 3 of y'all back on at some point or another. Sometimes we even play trivia games as part of the dinner party as well. I just didn't get around to creating those, because sometimes I'll get some trivia questions that I'll ask, and it might be some historical facts and things of that nature. I might even give a prize to people in the show, as well as those that are watching, that involves like maybe a gift card or something like that nature. So you didn't get that this time, but the next time I have you on, that might be featured as well, because that is part of the dinner party theme and all of that. And I've used that a couple of times, but I've been off of it now for a month or 2. So it's about time to bring those games back. So they will probably be on the next couple of episodes. So Dan, look forward. I'm going to bring you back at some point, and you're going to have to have your thinking cap on, because I'll bring a lot of famous quotes and quotes from these people, and maybe even some historical facts about them. And then you have to guess who they are. They've included everybody from Madame Curie to some famous woman that had a lion that was in London, to some of our past presidents, to definitely some historical figures as well, and some sports figures also. So don't worry. I think Muhammad Ali was a clue and one of them. And I want to say that the person that did the fist at the 1968 Olympics was one, and I think Jesse Owens was one as well, and maybe even Jim Thorpe. But definitely, I'm gonna have to bring you back. So there might be, who knows, maybe a question about FloJo. But I'm not saying that just in case. It might be a FloJo opponent.
Sure.
So you might have to listen and figure out whether I'm talking about FloJo or Kathy Freeman or somebody else that was in that realm of women's sports. But definitely that will be the next time y'all come back. And hopefully that'll be sometime in August or September. So just y'all are part of the family. So all of that is to say you're not part of the family. And I'd love to hear your answer to that quick question that I asked, which is how people can reach you and your message of positivity. And I'll start with you, Dan, and then go to Jason, and then we'll get on out of here.
Okay. Again, I wrote the book to entertain. I think there's a lot going on in the world. People have, hectic lives. And if I can take them away from that for a little while and entertain them, and along the way, maybe inspire them, that was really my goal. And if you want to read more about me, order the book. You can do that. Probably the best way is through my website. It's authordanromanello.com, or you can go to Amazon Books, Barnes & Noble, or any other online bookstore and pre-order the book, which will be out on August 1st.
Cool. And your message of positivity and hope.
I have the ability to do
That
For
was
those
it.
who want to hear.
my day.
I want people to read my book and be entertained and be inspired and give them a break from everyday life, because I just think, we're just in a hectic time right now. And I guess, to maybe expound on that a little bit, because I think I understand your question, don't be afraid to try new things. I've done a lot of different things in my life, and there's just feel free to break out of your comfort zone. Just take that step. It's not as difficult or scary as people think it is.
Jason, I'm hearing your animals in the background. As I told you before, I'm a fan of Mother Nature. I've done cat sitting and I've done other things as well. So I'm definitely loving those animals in the background. I sometimes think that I am empathetic toward animals as well as humans. So I'm loving that in the background. Just wanted to share that with you. And then I'd love to hear your message of positivity and hope and ways that people can get in touch with you. And when you think, if you want to remind people once again, when your music project will hopefully be out.
Yeah, for sure. My music project can be, it's on all major platforms except Spotify right now. I'm having a little bit of difficulty, I shall say, with my producer and my label right now. That's a whole nother topic I don't want to get into. But as far as providing somebody with hope, I would just say find a healthy coping mechanism, like, kind of maybe expounding on just exactly what Dan was saying, to get people kind of away or provide them escape, a healthy escape, meaning not, that's not in drugs or alcohol or anything like that. Whether it's sports or music or entertainment or even writing or poetry or any of those things, whatever you have to do to get through the day, do it.
No matter what, I have been honored by knowing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate that and everything. That is a positive message. And I'm so glad that you said that. And I agree with you on that. So on that note, I think we're going to get on out of here. I'm going to run a couple of quick spots, I think, and then I'll get out with the 30-second spot over here and everything. But as I said, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope, well, Jason, you'll have to be coming back for a third time. And I'm hoping that you will definitely do that. And I'm hoping that Dan will come back as well. And I hope that even though we got deep, he enjoyed the conversation. I told you that when I had that email with you that we kind of go all over the place. And that's kind of the nature of what I feel is at a dinner party, particularly if you're used to those families like I have, where you might have just about any conversation at the dinner table, including sports and entertainment and news of the day and all of that. And you just better be ready to be prepared to talk about any of that, because I'm expecting that even when I run into my cousins because of that sad news that I mentioned earlier, we'll probably be having some of these conversations as well that I'll probably bring on to future shows based on what my cousins and me talk about during that time. Because like I said, we'll have some memories, even as my Archie was talking about, of that particular uncle and all of that, and regretting that we did not get that book written and all, but we will also be remembering things that he said, because one of his favorite sayings that he had every time you called him was, "I'm doing the best I can with what I got." That was one of his favorite sayings, and I think that is a great saying that Uncle Randy was known for saying. Whenever you called him up, and if Aunt Julie, who usually would pick up the phone, would wind up passing it to him, that was his favorite quote. "I'm doing the best I got, the best I can with what I got." So that is a good attitude that I think many of us need to have, and all of that. So any final thoughts that y'all want to share before I bring these commercials on? Otherwise, we'll get ready to bring these commercials and get on out of here. But if y'all have any final thoughts, now is the time to bring those up. Otherwise, we'll get ready to get out of here.
No, thanks again for having me. I look forward to coming back.
Cool.
Yeah, likewise.
Sounds good. So we're going to hear a little bit about some of these businesses that are out there. So I'm going to bring up the Level Up Your Business one, and then maybe a couple of other ones, and get on out with the 30-second spot. But I thoroughly enjoyed having these three gentlemen on as part of the dinner party, and we'll look forward to seeing who our guests will be next Wednesday. I know that I sent out some invitations, so it should be another full house and another great conversation. I might even see if Dan's available and if he wants to join the other folks as well. And I am going to make sure that we have that trivia contest next week. So look forward to it. And no, I'm not giving any clues right now. So other than it'll be from sports, entertainment. Well, actually, I will give a clue. I'm going to find somebody from a foreign country, probably somebody, I think I did Africa. So one of the 54 African nations, somebody from the world of sports, and maybe somebody from the world of crime. Other than that, everything is game. And that's a wide range of people to pick from, because Africa's got 54 nations. We know there's been a whole lot of criminals, and there's definitely been a lot of sports. So I got a lot that I can pick from in that category and all of that, but it'll be from one of those three categories. Dan, if I forget, and if you're a guest, and Jason, if I forget and you're a guest, remind me.
All right.
All right. On that note, let's get on out of here.
Since all of these
Are you aware that showing off your expertise can gain customers and position you as an expert in your industry? Consumers need confidence to purchase, so let us showcase your knowledge by interviewing you for a 3 to 5 minute video. We'll position you as an industry expert with a customized interview-style video, and for a limited time, we'll cover all production costs. Click this ad or call now for all the information. You'll want to experience the same 5-star service our customers love. So take advantage of this one-time offer. Click this ad or contact us now.
La connexion. La connexion.
In a world obsessed with the cult of celebrity, I challenge you not to aspire to anyone else's greatness, but instead strive to reveal and ignite the greatness within you.
Are you serious?
I totally think that that's it.
Hey. No! Hey! To me, Sexy is a man that knows who he is and what he wants. He's comfortable. You look at him, you see him, he's just comfortable being himself. And you're like, baby, be you. Be you, baby.
Just be you. I like it. Introducing the BU collection, exclusively available at K&G Fashion Superstore.